By the Numbers, episode 81. I'm your host of the new season, by the way. Means we've done like 121 episodes of this in total.
Not bad.
But anyway, yeah, not bad.
That actually makes it, in that case, the podcast that I've done the most in the history of esports. Because even Summon Insight, I think it was
Wow.
like 79 episodes or something. I don't think we ever got to 100 any of the ones I did.
Hang on, people are saying I'm low again. Is that at your end, Sam? Yeah, I'm putting my gain
I think
up
they just lie
and
half the time, innit?
yeah, I'm putting my
But I
gain up.
edit
Fuck
it.
'em.
You know, an editing
Yeah.
program tells you how loud things are. So, like, am
Yeah.
I the one who's mental? But I go in, definitely not. But your voice is just higher 90% of the time. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
because you got more bass in your voice or
No,
something
but
like that. But
here's what's
decimal-wise,
gonna happen
it
now. As soon as I shout, they're gonna say, "Oh, get a compressor
Oh,
for
it's
your mic."
fucking
if you
loud,
do
that
know.
is,
I know.
like.
10 minutes 20, warning headphone users.
Yeah, I know. Love those
As opposed
guys.
to the rest of us that all use a massive speaker system for a podcast. You daft little cunts. Everyone's
Tell 'em.
using headphones.
Tell 'em.
Head.
Tell them. Right, anyway, so yeah, it's episode 121 of By the Numbers in total. Episode 81 of Return of By the Numbers. But how could it be the return 81 times? I'm gonna flip the script a little bit here, Duncan, because usually we do events first, news at the end, and I feel like there's been so much news. I want to do news first, and the events weren't all that
Yeah, let's do it.
spectacular, were they? So let's get into it. So why don't we start with the NIP announcement, right? I'll kind of go in order of priority. We were obviously talking about this just before we went live. I think for a while, NIP have realized that where they're positioned hasn't been great. They have the occasional tournament where they get to the knockout stages and maybe take a big scalp. But in terms of genuine title contention, it's been a while since you think of NIP as a team that can go to a tournament, potentially win it up there with the big boys. Lots going on with this announcement that NIP have made today, basically saying they want to start bringing in new blood to the team, and they're going to make some changes. Now, if you watch this show regularly, all 121 episodes of it, you'll know that about 3 months ago or whatever, we just said we were going to fucking start saying that Plopski, the Swedish player, was the best prospect in all of Sweden, just because his name sounds like a sloppy poo, right? So it turns out...
By the way, they actually, in Sweden, this is a real thing, they have a chocolate bar called Plop, and it's written like that.
Never eaten that, mate. Never
It's
eaten
chocolate
that.
as well, for fuck's sake. Of all the thing that you could imagine, just like imagine the commercial, the Willy Wonka style factory with that ripping down brown material that
Now with nuts and corn.
I know. Plop.
I know. No one ever wanted plop, did he? Who's having a plop? Anyone for a plop? Like, no, it's outrageous, isn't it? So anyway, but we said because of his funny name that Plopski was the best prospect in Sweden. Turns out it might actually be true because he has been playing really well, and he's only 17, and now he's going to be added to NIP. This also means that it's going to be the end of Dennis in the team, which I think is fine. We'll get into Dennis's statement a little bit once I've let you break down this main statement. But then a weird bit just in the end where they start talking about Get Right is going to leave. I guess that it's being framed as retirement. It says in the announcement that Get Right will stop competing after the Berlin Major in 2019, and they will start looking for a suitable long-term replacement. But they're not going to get rid of him until they're comfortable with the replacement. But when they do get the replacement, he's going to transition into a different role, whatever that might take. So a bit of a strange announcement there, because it's like it's a retirement, but maybe it isn't. Blah, blah, blah. But again, I'm sure you've got your own thoughts about it. But look, I think just as the entry point to talk about this, I think we've known for a while that NIP has sort of been cruising along, not really doing too much. Never bad enough to be an embarrassment, but never good enough to be a winner.
No, that's actually the thing also that in a weird way has been a bit depressing about this era, this particular core of NIP, is that In some ways, you could actually argue they were more consistent than some of the past NIP lineups. Like they had a lot of times, as you say, they were a playoff team in most tournaments. I even made a video where I showed that bizarrely they basically used to always play the better teams like close but losing 3 maps, but they could also play a worse team close in 3 maps and barely win. So it's like they were always like just far enough away from greatness that they never were really going to get it, but they also were never like bad outright. They were always a solid team. They're always a top 10 team. But the reason why that was kind of underwhelming is because the one thing NIP used to have going in the years before was like, yeah, at times they could be a bad team, but then they'd have the magic win, wouldn't they? They'd have the one tournament where they'd do a miracle win, take the whole event. Well, that's the thing. This era of NIP was never going to do that. They didn't ever have a string of games that were ever that dominating like that. It tended to be pretty similar from game to game. And then you look at the lineup they have. I still think if you look at their lineup on paper, it's crazy this wasn't a better team. I know they don't really have a true leader, which has clearly been a problem for them for a long time, but just the strength of the names, like it feels like they should be better. They clearly have a skilled lineup. So something about the identity of their team never fully hung together. So in terms of like removing Dennis, I get it. Like, I don't necessarily think he was always the worst player. He certainly had times last year where he was pretty fucking bad. When he came back from his little break, he was all right. But I will say, kind of in line with what he kind of suggested himself in his leaving statement, I don't think he ever fit NIP, to be honest. Like, obviously, they initially brought him in as an in-game leader, even a role which we've mentioned many times. He had promised publicly to never try again. So I think it kind of shows that he was just in a tough spot when he even accepted that position. I never felt like within NIP they found a great role for him where he could excel. Because I do kind of think like he could still be a good player in a different type of a team. It's just not NIP. So I think it's the most obvious player to remove. The other players who've had their issues are the likes of Get Right, who are the legendary players. And for obvious reasons, you're not going to be frivolous with how you cut a player like that. I can see why they're really, using kid gloves on that one.
Yeah, I get it. So just to add a little bit about the Dennis situation, I kind of agree. He put out a tweet longer, which was barely longer than what a tweet would have been, where he said, as you probably know, I've been dropped from the squad. I was never the worst or second worst player in this 5-man squad statistically. I'm not sure about that, honestly.
I don't think that's actually true.
Yeah.
We'll ignore that for now.
We'll let you rewrite your own history on the way out. Why not? That's not why I had to go. The reason behind this is that we didn't click, and it's just hard playing without an IGL. When there's no leader, there's too many question marks, and that results in too many arguments, which has impact on the game itself.
That seems plausible.
I believe this is best for both parties. I can find a new home where I fit better and hopefully play with a real IGL. Wish them all the best in the future, especially Rez, one of the best teammates and players I've played with. Big thank you to NIP, Hitchum, and the crew. So, I mean, what it sounds like to me here is that basically when Dennis didn't want to live up to that, kind of weight of being the IGL, they tried to do what they've done for a long, long time, NIP, and that is basically be a team by committee, which is a fucking disaster. They never work, and you can see as well, he's been quite blunt and said, look, we've had many arguments, and this has impacted on the game itself in the end. Now, you might see NIP and think that that's not the case. Generally, they don't have arguments in game. Generally, they keep it light and breezy in game. But things can get fractious off the server and away from the cameras. I think because they were one of the teams that really had the first high levels of scrutiny in CSGO, they understand. Don't do it in the game. Don't do it on stage. People will see. People will talk. That'll snowball and create its own pressure. They've always been good about keeping any issues they have private, But clearly there was something not right.
You can also even throw in, Rich, I'll say it, as a team, they don't really seem like a team where they ever even had like the whole passive-aggressive tweets thing. That's more like a Fnatic thing from what I remember. But obviously that's been a problem with a lot of squads in the game. I have to say, I agree. For all the things behind the scenes where I've known they've had a player that didn't fit or they didn't like or a guy wanted to leave, they've never really took it publicly. They've done a pretty good job keeping that under wraps.
Yeah, well, I think that all, again, just to get all whimsical and historical for a moment, I think that actually dates back to when they had that documentary crew filming them, like pretty much round the clock at DreamHack Winter 2013, which was, of course, meant to be the major they won.
Sure.
Which, of course, it didn't turn out that way, and they had that, upset defeat against Fnatic. And it was all caught on camera, and there's stories about that. Like friberg pushing a cameraman out the way when they tried to stick a camera in his face, and they were super disappointed. And
sure.
and I think they learned very early on about the sort of level of scrutiny the game had the potential to get as we entered into that early stages of it actually being fiscally fiscally reasonable to host esports tournaments around and have a team for. So yeah, they've definitely been good about not airing their dirty linen in public. That being said as well, I think with Dennis being brought into the team, I almost feel like, I don't want to say it was a Hail Mary, but I think everybody identified he was too good a player to be in free agency, but there wasn't really a Swedish team that could have took him, and that was either commensurate to his talents or really had a role where he could slot in and be himself. So I do feel immensely sorry for him.
He probably should have been on a FaZe or a Mouse Sport. Some of the teams I've heard, potentially connected with in the past. He probably should have been on one of those squads.
Yeah, well, there was the Mouse Sports thing, I think, nearly happened, right? Yes. So I think what happened to Dennis was that he basically, he took an offer that seemed good on paper. You get to stay in Sweden, you get to play with Swedes, but the role wasn't right and the chemistry wasn't right, and it's potentially set back his career irreparably, honestly, because he was in a very good place when he moved into free agency. Everybody was talking about what a great player he was. He was considered one of the best pistol players in the world. He was putting out unbelievable fragging statistics at that time. So it was just so it's just a shame the way it's all worked out. Just in terms as well of as this, you said you understand why they're handling the Get Right transition out with kid gloves. It's interesting to me. I've seen a lot of people getting on Get Right's case lately.
He has had pretty bad stats over most of the year.
Yeah, and I think we need to obviously talk about that, right? Sure, he's had bad statistics, no doubt about it.
At least, especially in the context of being Get Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think this is part of the cross the bear of having been one of the greatest players to ever touch the game. That when your stats do go off a cliff, this isn't like some forgivable thing where it's like we'll say, oh, okay, but like, let's be real. When he was at his peak, it wasn't sustainable to be that good. I mean, Get Right sustained being unreal.
It's unbelievably consistent, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much since
he might have had like a half a decade run across 1.6 of CSGO those years. It was mental how good he was for how long, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there was always going to be a dip, and when you also factor in, this is somebody who's had personal problems.
Sure.
This is somebody who's had really bad health problems.
Some irreconcilable, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And, he's had to make lots of lifestyle changes and everything. I think it's forgivable that he's had the dip that he has. And I'll also say I don't think it's as bad as some people believe it to be. Like, I'm going to just bring up the graph in front of me, and I don't know if you want to do it as well, Sam. Just his HLTV stats. Yeah, you will notice a very pronounced drop off, and it has been a consistent downward trajectory to the point where pretty much in 2019 he's almost at a career low, where he's very regularly having ratings below 1.0 and stuff. But I still think that with Forest maintaining an unbelievable level of consistency, and the fact that those two players have a great understanding and can play off each other, I think Rez has been, revelatory of late. Jury might still be out on Lekro a little bit for me, especially because he's the guy that's doing the in-game leadership role, so I don't really know if we have a gauge for him. I still could see that if Plopsky can do the heavy lifting and blossom into the talent we all hope he's going to be, I could still see a role for Get Right in this team, and this team actually still be successful. But there is no getting away from the fact that currently Christopher's a shadow of the player that he once was.
The key thing for me with the whole Get Right angle, and this is one of those things where, sadly, people don't tend to ask these questions in interviews. It's tough to get an answer. Like, I would really like to know how they see his role in NIP at the moment. Because if they could convince me that he's just going to make a maybe not graceful, but a classy transition that like Neo and Taz did to being a supportive element in a team, and he's going to set other people up to succeed, and he doesn't have to take a lot of resources, then I could buy into the idea that let's make use of this guy's experience. Let's make use of the fact he's a great teammate and is a winner and someone who's been very consistent. Let's use all those factors to our advantage. Problem is, if he's getting any kind of like dictation over where he plays and his role and these things, then I do see him as someone that you can definitely upgrade, and it's even worth trying a new player out for, because I kind of see it similarly in Nip. Basically, outside of Rez and I don't think I'd even conclude that. I think it's basically just Rez and Forrest are the only players I'd definitely keep. Lekro, I'm on the fence with. I also wouldn't mind if you had a great prospect to replace him with, or if you could get a Fnatic player. Obviously, I think I would do that instantly. So I kind of feel like it's a team where it's not a one-player move anyway. I don't think that one player, even if Plopsky turns up really good, takes him to the top. I feel like it is a process where you are transitioning from the Get Right and Forest era of their main players to one in which maybe it's only the Forest era, or maybe it's Forest and then Get Right's playing a very, very, very much reduced role, and you let other people be starring elements. So that's the key thing for me, is I want to know if Nip actually, does he have to still be Get Right? If he does, he can't do it anymore. I can tell you that. He just can't be Get Right anymore. I've watched him many games. If he's going to be a different player and we're going to ignore that his name's Get Right, but he can do that role, then I'm up for it. Because as people may notice, as much as I may be harsh on players, when I know someone has a limited job and they do that, I'll give those guys a lot of leeway. When I know you can contribute something to a team, I'll give the Fogleys, the Steakos of the world some space to prove me otherwise, that they're better than the 0.6 rate FPR or whatever they're putting up statistically that would make them look shit. I'll give them some leeway there. But I don't really necessarily know that I buy that Get Right does that at the moment.
Yeah, and look, and a few people in the chat have said that, and again, I can't remember if this is true or not, because they do chop and change, it seems, quite often, that Get Right's been doing some of the in-game leading.
I think that has been suggested in the past, but that might have just been a throwaway interview comments. I never heard any big announcement. Sadly, it's one of those things teams don't announce, isn't it? Yeah. I even said this in the past. I've done tweets. If I was tournament organizers, the ESLs of the world, I would just say at the beginning of the tournament, when you send in your sheet telling me who your 5 players are, please put an asterisk or whatever next to the in-game leader, just so I can know on screen and the commentators aren't just using old information. I don't think it gives away too much about the team. That's some critical thing you have to hide. It would just be nice to know at all times.
Yeah, and absolutely, and of course as well. Then that does give
a bit more leeway, maybe. For
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that what we always do in the scene? Like, I mean, I find there's like a weird inconsistency there, because he's been a legendary player. If he is transitioning to the in-game leadership role and it's coincided with the dip in statistics, like, I think we forgive everyone else for that, even players who've never been in any way legendary. So, does seem a little bit strange to me that there's especially NIP fans who were willing to, like, NIP fans are just weird. Like, they'll let you get away with anything, and up until the point where they just decide that there's nothing you can do anymore to win, to keep their love. And then, when you actually do retire and leave the team, they then flip back and go, "Oh God, I can't believe it! I can't believe it." It's like they are a weird fucking fan base to kind of try and placate and pander to. But anyway, look, so just a final question on this. Do you think the changes, without even knowing who's going to be the long-term replacement for Get Right, obviously, do you think these changes are a step in the right direction? I mean, honestly, I just can't imagine it making the team any worse.
Yes. Yeah, the key thing is, like, what you're gambling is worth gambling. Like, you were gambling a team where realistically the best case scenario was probably to come top 4 at a big tournament. That was it, and lose. You were not top 4 and like, oh, we almost won the semi. No, you'd probably lose that semi. Like, that's the best scenario. And it's not like you did that every tournament. There's many tournaments you just made the playoffs and went straight out immediately against anyone whatsoever. So yeah, I don't think what you're gambling is enough to say, like, oh, well, I've got this here, so do I really want to gamble giving that up? It's like, no, even if the team becomes shit, it's worth the gamble to bring in, especially if it's fresh talent, people who've never played before, in the hopes that they end up being the next Get Right and Forest. And now you actually have an amazing team. That's why I think it is worth the move. Again, even though we can't know who it is. But that's the other thing. I don't buy the idea we're just going to go through and, like, Sweden's just done for Counter-Strike talent. Like, surely we're going to have some amazing Swedish players come through. I don't know if it'll be Plopsky. I only saw him play a little bit in that Existence Galaxy team, which was the end of last year under Barbar. So I haven't seen enough to nearly see that he's some hot shit talent. He looks all right. But then again, he's never played in a team like NIP before. And quite frankly, I've always said this. The thing about CSGO compared to 1.6 is in 1.6, I felt like you could actually a lot more judge a player in a vacuum and just look at him. And you could see players who are on worse teams and be like, that guy's going to be fucking amazing. It's way harder in CSGO. That's why the people like Simple and Nico, that's why I call them prodigies. Like the idea they can carry anyone and do that, they're just not human, mate. Like normal players, the team you play on will have a massive, massive impact on how good you are. I'd even say a good example in the modern day, if you want an analogy on that, would be Amanek. Amanek has looked better on every better team he gets onto. But if you'd seen him on the first LDLC that I remember seeing him on, you'd never pick this guy as a guy who's going to be on a top team. So, like, he's an example, I'd say, if he plays to the level of the team he's on.
And
by the way, just as an aside, I'll also just maybe throw out there that I actually think it's quite a smart approach to what they're doing with Get Right. Because one thing I hope they can do if they transition him out of being a pro player is in some capacity keep him in the org. Because I've said this to you before. One thing that kills me is that we don't have legends who actually have any association to their teams that they made their legendary accomplishments with. Like, I'm sorry. No, like, remember, CSGO fans will barely even know Forrest ever played for Fnatic, their main rival. And they definitely won't understand that he was at one point in time the most legendary player Fnatic had. Because that's the sad thing. Unlike, like, I guarantee if you go this year, you'll find some kind of a charity thing or something where Alan Shearer will do something with Newcastle Football Club, maybe a youth program. If you go with the Lakers, Kobe Bryant will heavily be involved, inquired with about potential moves. Maybe they'll ask his opinion on a coaching change. What sucks about esports is our legends don't remain like, you know, kind of a Mount Rushmore figure for their team going forwards because they have such short careers. They have so many contentious negotiations over contracts and stuff. So I hope that this is Heaton or someone himself within NIP, realizing he never was able to do that with, you know, SK and other teams he was in. And that we've got to also start on the back end of people's careers, keeping them involved in the business. Because if you can market and Get Right or Forest when they're beyond their career with NIP, you can keep the NIP brand relevant and interesting, even if NIP, the team, isn't at that moment in the server killing it and playing legendary Counter-Strike. I feel like it's a big kind of like untapped area in esports.
For sure. So we'll leave the NIP stuff there. Obviously, they can't use Plopsky for the major, which
they weren't going to win it anyway. It's fine to do that. They're one of the good cases where I don't mind that they could basically going to half blow the major in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. Think that they're legitimately thinking long term. This isn't like a Cloud9 issue, which we'll get to shortly. But the other interesting thing that sort of happened was sort of out of nowhere, Ghost, basically their entire team just fucking imploded. You know, it looked like they let all their contracts run out. Now it's a strange one because Ghost Gaming seemed to be an organization that was willing to sort of, you know, look, we'll operate outside of the Valve system. We can still make money. I think they've been very successful overall in picking up Steel, who obviously is banned from Valve tournaments, and I think they've enjoyed a modicum of success out of it. I think they're a well-liked team. I think they've had a lot of positive attention. I think the community has embraced what they're trying to do.
I think they have like a cult following, don't they? They kind of they do have a niche that's interested in them for sure.
And if I understand correctly as well, I think they're owned by one of the guys that founded Weed Maps, I think it is as well. I think that's where their principal amount of money comes from. And they've always been quite a well-financed organization. So this isn't like one of those bedroom organizations that basically like have to get rid of the team because they can't afford money, right? Like they've all, go look at the Call of Duty stuff they've had, like with their team house and everything. So anyway, it's crazy to me that they've just kind of let the clock wind down, especially so soon after they made a roster change, which was Steel wanting to bring in Freakazoid to help kind of impose a much more rigid culture and also have a bit more mental resilience for some of the younger players that he was developing. He's turned Kusta's career around. He's developing Neptune. I think I understand that maybe Steel and Wardell didn't get along. But they've still played together and been relatively successful and overcome that particular boundary. But then it gets weird. Like Wardell signed a longer contract, so he's still technically part of Ghost, even though it doesn't look like Ghost are necessarily going to have a CS:GO team moving forward. I mean, we don't know about that, and so you've ended up with Freakazoid, Steel, Kusta, and Neptune all into free agency. And kind of at an awkward time, because obviously you can't pick up any. If you go into the major, especially, you can't make any wholesale changes. So yeah, just weird that it just came out from nowhere.
I've also got to say, like, I've just looked up now on Wikipedia the last few lands they've been to, because I was looking at the period where they had Freakazoid. Yeah. What did they do wrong? Go look at these tournaments.
No, I know.
All the teams they lose to are teams bigger than them, better than them, ranked higher. Yeah. Like, some of them, they even get hard done by. Like, when they did that tournament, the DreamHack Tours. Yeah, their problem is cause fucking G2 just lost that game to the Franks Frogs teams. They lose to Avanga, pretty solid team, and then they have to play G2 in a best of 3, a team that's actually above their pay grade. So I'm not even sure. Like, it's not even like the results demand this, you know. I realize the placings aren't good. Yeah, it's going to look shit on your Wikipedia column before you open the tournaments. But when you go and look who they played, what were you expecting? Like, they shouldn't have done much more than this. So I would say over the whole time they've had the team, they've generally been a team that exceeded expectations. They performed better than they should. In terms of the talent they brought in, as you say, basically the only real talent they had in this team was they had Steel, who was much better than they should be able to get, but for obvious reasons is stuck in a tough spot. And I thought that's why it was a perfect marriage, because the whole point is, as an org in CS, they were nobody. But if you ride or die with Steel and he actually makes a team as he did, now you've got something. Yeah, you'll never play in majors, but you weren't really at the major making the top 8 type level anyway. So that doesn't really matter as much beyond the financial aspects. That yes, there certainly had benefits to being in majors. And he made so much of those players you brought that a bunch of them were like, never was, never would be, and never will. You know, like that sort of players. Basically, the only other talent was Wardell. Wardell was very legit initially, probably would have been signed away, but was whatever, loyal initially. Outside of that, I mean, I don't really know what more you could want. Like, this seems like it's a team where, if I had to guess, the investment looks like it must be fairly low compared to what they actually got for it. Like, I know a lot of people out there who, if the numbers in the ballpark I'm thinking of in my mind, would love to fucking min-max a team like this and pay, in theory, quite little, very little for signings, and then get some occasional big upsets over massive teams, occasional nice placings, and all right, and generally, as you say, actually have kind of like a weird niche fan culture. Like, people fucked with this team mainly because of Steel and kind of the underdog story, but in a way that was like way above the level of what they're actually accomplishing. I kind of thought they had like that little cult following. So unless this is some kind of financial aspect, which, as you say, doesn't really line up, seems like a weird timing to do the move.
Yeah.
Unless they were so delusional they thought they were going to have a top team, you know.
Well, yeah, but this is the other thing as well. So again, we're not sure whether they're going to get another CS:GO team.
The Wardell bit sounds very alarming, because this has never happened in Counter-Strike, but I've always feared the real nightmare is if you ever got a team that was weird enough that they had you under contract. In the contract, they said they had to pay your salary to not play you, but they agreed, I'll just pay your salary, and basically, unless someone meets this buyer, I will literally keep you in contract prison. You won't even have a team to play for me. Luckily, that's come close a couple of times, but it's never really happened. Like, most times people did release the player or they agreed to a lower buyout. But like that would obviously be the nightmare, as a real contract prison where you can't even play for your team. There is no team.
And apparently Dust has just said that that Ghost are doing what a lot of the NA orgs are doing, where it's like, oh, we're getting out of CS for now, you know, like kind of like Rogue.
CLG did also say, so did old Splicey List.
All be back, of course, when they can make some real money out of it.
What they should do as a joke is say, I'll be right back as soon as. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use all the profit I make from my LCS or Overwatch League team, and I'll build a team with that when I have it. Because that way, what's genius is, it sounded like you were saying you were going to in a few years, but actually, you know, semantically, you'd never have to do it.
Yeah. But so the situation with Wardell, I agree. This could be sort of the acid test of how inescapable these contract prisons actually can be.
I mean, if I'm Jack Etienne, I'm literally just spamming with like a fucking rotary, you know, one of those like robot dialers, like 24/7. This Ghost Gaming guy's number.
Well, yeah, but I think that's actually probably why they didn't want to just cut him loose.
Sure.
I mean, the lesson here
I've no
is
doubt someone will buy him.
Oh yes, but the lesson here is to any pro, these 2-3 year contracts that are being pushed by agents will get you more in the short term, which benefits the agents because that means they get bigger cuts, bigger percentages. But a 3 year contract in CS:GO is insanity.
As far as I can tell, we've had this discussion before, Rich.
Yeah, it'll always hurt you. It'll always hurt you.
I actually can't think of one really good reason why it would ever benefit the player. As far as I can tell, it doesn't. The player thinks sillily. Here's the reason I think they get tricked, Rich, is because in real sports, that is the best thing, is to get the long contract. The problem is it doesn't work. Our industry is nothing like that. So you don't get any of those benefits that they get from having like the 5-year contract in whatever, the NFL or whatever it is. Like you don't get any of that. You just get all the downside of the 5-year contract.
Exactly. And then you get added to the fact where it's like very often what they never factor in is that a lot of these contracts also have a reduction in salary.
Yes.
When you're not playing, if you're benched. So you actually don't even get the security that you think you're getting.
Yes.
But of course, everybody always thinks, well, my team's going to last forever and no one's ever going to drop me.
That's why it works for young people, isn't it? Because the young person that's the reason the young teenagers, etc., make so many questionable decisions, is because they think if they take a certain drug, well, they're never going to be the guy who ODs. That doesn't happen to people like me. Like, they can't ever think that it's going to go badly. And obviously, like a young player, beginning of his career, he's got skills. He's never going to think that in a year and a half he could be shit. Problem is, a lot of them will be.
Now, we can use this as a leap-off point to sort of transition into talking about Cloud9. Because I do think Wardell, having been linked with Cloud9 before, it's a pretty good destination. Although,
use an AWPer like that, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Automatic's a great AWPer, but I think he'd probably rather go back to... I mean, Tim's just in fucking hell. I mean, let's just start by talking about the American Miner that happened. And this is mind-blowing to me. And this is the low point for Cloud9 in CS:GO. When you consider that we're only talking, start of last year, they win a major, and it's all been downhill since then. But I mean, it often is downhill after you win a major, right? I mean, because the only way to sustain is win another and win another and win another, right? So that makes sense, but nobody could have predicted it would get this bad. So obviously, we had the America
and the killer as well. If you think, Rich, is every move they made that at the time was good and right didn't hold up. Like they don't have K-Shame anymore. Flusher went back home. Like every time it looked like they did a good move, it didn't in the long run work out. Unfortunately, so I feel like as a result, it looks like they just did only wrong moves.
Oh, I mean, it has been just a catastrophe. Just so many errors piled upon errors. And it's just really strange to me because, I know Jack, right? Jack is a savvy guy. Jack actually gives a fuck about Counter-Strike and wants to stay involved in Counter-Strike at a time when all of his little, NA buddies are pulling out and telling him it's stupid.
And remember, he's in both LCS and Overwatch League. So he has really no reason to stay in CSGO unless he wants to.
So I do find the way that this team has gone to be incredibly bizarre. And look, I didn't think Golden was ready to come back, nor did I think he was the solution. There's clearly something going on with Golden. I'll always maintain Fnatic fucking him over was outrageous. But since then, Cloud9, it just hasn't been a marriage.
He hasn't made him have to think about it twice, has he? Put that way.
No, not at all. And I know he's had health problems, and I know he couldn't go to events and whatever else, and it's sad. But, it just hasn't worked, and they're trying to get this guy to put together these disparate parts, and I just think it's beyond him. The Cajun B move was a bit weird for me. I think he's a very good tenured player, but he's coming towards the end of his career himself. I think he's like 27, 28. He's been around the block. He doesn't have any natural ties to NA. I think there are players of equivalent skill in NA that an org like Cloud9 should be able to get. So it was bizarre, but actually since joining, he's played probably the best out of any of them. And in some games, he's even had, high statistical impact than even Automatic, who is the fucking golden boy of this team. And then the acquisition of Vice, man alive. At a time when NA has so much talent out there, young talent, that is up for grabs. They go and get this guy Vice, and I talked about it with Hiko, I think, in an interview I did for the Circle a while back, where he was very glowing about him. But man, this guy's meant to be having his breakout year every fucking year for how many fucking years? And it's never happened.
Be 3 or 4 now.
Yeah, I mean that tells me that the cat just ain't good enough. Yeah. Like, think about it. We never heard about Automatic when he played famously for 6 teams in 1 year. We heard he was decent, but we never heard he was going to break out. And then when Stewie 2K basically said, let's get this guy because I like him and I played with him and I think we can do some shit together on Cloud9, that propelled him into the stratosphere. If it was going to happen with Vice, it would have happened by now. He's had the opportunities. So I think this was a very mediocre pickup, especially when we just talked on the last episode, the embarrassment of riches in NA, and you've got this TenZ kid out there as well, coming through. We had Oboe just go off at Complexity. Like, Vice ain't the one, and was never going to be the one. So I very surprised about that. So, I mean, and that's before we even get into all the players they've let go or couldn't induce to stay, or unfortunate events like with Flusher. It's just a nightmare. But anyway, this team should have gone into this minor and still fucking qualified. So they lose, first off, to New Identity, which is a team that the best known player on this team is probably Relix. Maybe John G.
A name maybe that I actually don't even think I've seen play Counter-Strike since I was at E-League in 2016.
This team is basically like the also-rans of the also-rans of the NA scene. And that's not to be disrespectful about them. That's just to basically say where they are. I still think Dazzle's, he didn't play great in this series, but I think Dazzle's a good player. John G fucking went off. And Relix has been around the block, but as you rightly say, where's this guy been? What's he been doing? Didn't he spend some time where he was like a fucking analyst or something for a while? But whatever, that can happen, right? Especially, we know what it's like. NA teams meet NA teams, always a shit show, always a dust up. Well, the next team they lose to, The Quest, straight cold 2-0, and this is made up of some of those on the periphery young players. The Snakes, formerly of, I think, Space Station. Voltage, who's been around for a while. Think he might have played in a Dignitas lineup off the top of my head. Grim, another Vaxuck's favorite young player that's going to be coming through. Exceed. So these are players that have been talked about as having potential, but never really been able to realize that potential. Very much in that sort of tier 3 of prospects, looking to break through at any time. And that team beat this tenured Cloud9 team 2-0, and it wasn't even fucking close, mate. I watched this. They battered them on Nuke. Mirage was basically padded by a couple of fucky eco rounds for Cloud9. It was still 16-11. So I don't know what to say about this Cloud9 team. And I think Rush came out and did a tweet longer saying this is like a career low point for him. I don't know. Automatic must be someone give him the number for the Samaritans. But this is absolute rock bottom for Cloud9, and what they need to do is fucking decide. I mean, the first big question for me, you get rid of Golden Vice and cajunB tomorrow. Fuck it, cut them all loose. Right. The question becomes: do you want to keep Rush? Can it still work? He's been in a bit of a funk. I still think he's a good enough player to keep. And then you have to build around Automatic, and you've got you need to tear this team down. This Theseus' ship of replacing one player with another player with another player and trying to maintain some coherent identity doesn't work in Counter-Strike. Never works. So it's a terrible time to be a Cloud9 fan. Terrible time to be a Cloud9 player.
I remember before they got cajunB, wasn't the original linked move that they were going to get I think they were going to get, wasn't it config and Juggy or something. They were going to get. I think they were going to get some Optic players. It was like a move.
Yeah, they were linked with the Optic players. Yeah.
Because here's the thing. That's the kind of move that I want to see C9 make. Because I kind of agree. Like, obviously, Automatic's a player you can build around. But more importantly, if you can go to a top player, could be a European player, and you tell him, listen, if you come to Cloud9 now, not only can I pay you mega bucks, I can buy you out if you're in a contract now, but the only player you'll be playing with of my current team is Automatic, who you've seen. He's major winner, he's a very good player, and we'll build the team from there. Because that's the thing. To me, his approach has been the opposite. He's tried to min-max. He's tried to get people that are sort of like, maybe this guy's on the outs of his career, but I could turn it around if I get him, and maybe he's inspired. You know, he's tried to go the route of getting like players that either used to have a good name, or maybe they'll be okay now, and hoped he'll just hit a miracle lineup. All works, maybe Golden elevates everyone's play. Instead, I think at this point, after this many failed lineups in a row, you got to go the other way, and you've got to go for the big time player. You have got to secure a big name guy where you're going to pay this guy fucking mega bucks. So that means it might need to be someone like coldzera if he's coming up on his contract in MIBR. Might have to be a fucking FaZe player if you want to gamble on someone. Might be Dennis coming out of Nip now. I mean, that's probably not the best example. He's not in great form. I would hope it's a big time player though, because at the very minimum, it sends a message to your fans like, hey, I might not have all these moves right, but this guy's a fucking player, right? At the moment, every roster move they've had of the last like 8, they were always like, I mean, I guess we'll see if it goes well. Like, even they weren't in on it. So just to send the message that Cloud9 isn't a team of mediocrity, I feel like you've got to go for the big signing. Not a Hail Mary, a big signing.
Yeah, I think it would just be nice to see, and I hope Jack understands the optics of this. It'd just be nice to see, right? You won the major, then you sold those players to MIBR. We know you made money on that, right? So we don't, and every time I read a headline about Cloud9, they're getting some VC funding, 20 mil here, 30 mil there, right? I understand that for a long time, like Jack was running Cloud9 hand to mouth. And was doing incredible things because he's got a great business mind. But those days are over. And I think the fans are just, like I say, a big marquee signing just shows you're willing to put money back into the team, that it's not an afterthought. And it will give everybody a pumped up, renewed confidence about the team. It doesn't even have to work out. Because look at MIBR, It didn't work out. But the 3 to 6 months of hype that team generated before it became the sort of insipid thing it is now, where they're a bit of a joke, is that can buy you enough time to maybe go out and get another player and, you know, maybe have a good tournament run or, you know, whatever it is that you need to do. So there was a report over in Rush B that suggested that, and this was backed up, of course, by the old classic Twitter follow, which is the Cloud9 special, that Daps might be coming in. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Cloud9 haven't had, like, all due respect to Golden, I don't think they've had the in-game leader that they needed for quite some time. And Daps can definitely be that guy. But also with that, they're also looking to pick up this kid, Tenz, who's this Canadian prospect, Tenz, T-E-N-Z. And a lot of people have been saying big, you know, good things about him. FNS, who is somebody who obviously is like, you know, didn't get his time to be a great in-game leader at Cloud9, actually tweeted out saying it hurts me to see Tenz not signed to a 2-year deal already because this kid leaks potential. It's gross, is what he says. So perhaps that's kind of alluding to something you might have heard behind the scenes. It might just be a genuine recommendation. Who knows? But that would obviously make it Tenz, Daps, Automatic, Russian, Cajun B, which I'll be honest, it's not spectacular. It's not what I think of when I think of Cloud9 in terms of caliber. But man alive, it's a better lineup than what they've got now, I think. Listen, I know there's a revolving door over at Cloud9 right now. I know like people are going to feel aggrieved for Vice and aggrieved for Golden. But again, just in terms of what's right for Cloud9, this cannot be any worse. You've just bombed out of the minor in 2 straight sets against opposition that absolutely has no right to beat you. And they outplayed you. These aren't flukes.
Oh, and I'll even say this as well. Here's the killer. This is like the absolute last nail in the coffin. Right? When people get excited that you almost won a game at a LAN, that's when your team is absolutely dire. Because that's what people do at the moment. People generally who are like top analysts, fans of the game from other teams, they don't really rag on Cloud9 a lot. It's not a team that everyone loves to call shit. All they do is sit around, and then when they have the odd one best of one that looks good, people actually get excited. They go like, "Oh, hey, Cloud9's doing all right, aren't they?" Like that's how you know you're absolute garbage. You don't have to actually accomplish anything, and people almost get excited for you. Like at this point in time, it's in a real bad spot. I don't think you necessarily have to kill everyone from the team. It's just that, like I say, the first step, if you just look at all the recent moves, it has to be a big time player. And that's not impossible. That's just going to take a lot of skill and a lot of like, you're going to have to really groom the player. You're going to have to talk to him for months. You're going to have to make him understand that this isn't another short-term move, that you're bringing him in for the long term and you want to build around him. I'd even maybe use examples from your other games, since at the moment CSGO is not the best example. You show them like, when I brought Jensen in for Cloud9, I swapped out a lot of my old players, but I stuck with him and I was going to build the team around him. We had a contender, and here's what I didn't like. There's a lot of ways you could do it, but it's got to be that big name play. Because as you say, it's not even that this one has to work. You just then send the message to your fans, listen, I'm not fucking around. I'm only in this game to win. And if it ain't now, hey, you know what? It's going to be in 2 years from now.
Yeah. And look, and you have to think as well about, right, Cloud9 is hands down been the CSGO team with the biggest fan base in NA.
Oh, easily.
They keep in mind, we all know what you little fuckers are like, you little cunts out there in cyberspace. Like, haha, you go to an event. I am a FaZe fan. FaZe get banged out. Haha, I am a Team Liquid fan.
I've always thought a lot of NA fans have like 4 jerseys.
No, they do. They all do. They all do. But the reality is, I'm at least willing to understand it for NA fans, because honestly, it's like me and Sam will tell you about being a Welsh football fan. You know what I mean? We're never at the
Euros, mate. The fucking Euros, though. Yeah, exactly. Almost won it, didn't
we? You know what I mean? Like, we don't fucking qualify, so we have to fucking support whoever the fuck's there that we like the look of, and occasionally, that might be like, well, I'm going with Cameroon this World Cup or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just how it is. So I've got sympathy with NA fans for doing it. But the point is now, it's not just about fucking Cloud9, is it? Because Team Liquid are the #1 team in the world. So if you're Cloud9, there's a realistic chance you're going to lose a significant portion of your fickle fan base.
If I was C9,
to Team Liquid,
I would be remembering right now what famously in League of Legends happened to CLG, where they were the #1 team. They had all the fans. They were the best performing team. And then a team called TSM came along, had their own amazing run of form, and completely usurped them. And CLG never got that fan base back again. They had their own little niche fan base that was their fans. But that's what you should be looking at. Because, as you say, that's actually probably the key thing as well. Is think of the level of success Team Liquid has had the last year and a half. They've had unprecedented success for NA in terms of consistency. Yes, obviously C9 won the major, but Team Liquid squad had a way better level of consistency, placings. And with all that, I would still say that I don't think they've yet overtaken C9 in terms of fan base. So as a result, it's still not gone. Like that, if you make the right team in Cloud9 in the next 6 months, you can still have the biggest fan base. You can, again, stretch that out again. Because actually, I think Team Liquid's in the spot right now where the reason they haven't fully usurped Cloud9 is they've only got the fans because they're winning. Like, winning's what's giving them their fan base and maybe growing and lowering the gap. The difference is Cloud9 had fans who were just fans for a long time because they've had such a great culture there and they've had so many epic, iconic players. So, if anything, now's the time you got to strike to make sure Team Liquid doesn't properly take that over and become America's team.
Yeah. And that is a big deal, especially when...
So sponsors, it's fucking huge. I know to this day, if you can tell the sponsor I won, the NA competition, as it were, like I'm on top of America. Well, if they're just a company within America, they don't give a fuck about Korea. They don't know what esports is in that sense. Like if you tell them I'm the best in America, they're going to think you're the best.
Yeah.
And you are for all intents and purposes if that's their market.
So those moves not confirmed, it's got to be said. So we'll wait and see what actually happens. But I think changes are coming to Cloud9 because I can't imagine this lineup gets another shake. They're basically embarrassing themselves and the Cloud9 brand. Honestly, I mean, this is the worst Cloud9 team I've seen in CS:GO. I think it's mind-boggling. Another free agent in NA right now is JDM, the last of the original sort of Envy lineup that Envy picked up. They benched him And I think we all saw this coming, that they were going to dismantle that side. And they were only using it to get certain league spots and whatever. But JDM is going to be a free agent as of the 1st of July. I'll tell you what, I forgot that the Uriah Faber-looking motherfucker was 29.
Oh, he's pretty old, yeah.
Yeah, he fucking doesn't look it, does he? Fucking using moisturizer and shit. Outrageous.
I'll avoid all the jokes about, late growth spurts and all that. It's just childish. Like his body. Right, no, whatever. I did it anyway in the end, didn't I?
I know, you're such a cunt. As soon as but it's always like that. It's always like that. As soon as people say like late growth spurt, I will avoid the jokes, the obvious jokes. You're not going to avoid the obvious jokes. You're drawing attention. Yeah, always. Anyway, but I didn't know he was 29. So the question now becomes, obviously, it wasn't that long ago that JDM was playing at a top level on a top team. And was, like I say, we all know what his weaknesses are. We all know he's a pure AWPer in the sense that his rifling still leaves a lot to be desired. And I know he's worked on that part of his game and made some improvement in that part of his game, but he's never going to be a player you could label a hybrid. He's an AWPer, and that's what you're getting. And if he doesn't have an AWP in his hands, then you're going to struggle to win rounds. But is he still good enough to maybe work his way into this kind of like discussion about all these NA teams potentially picking up some talent and making some changes as they look to kind of consolidate the amount of talent they've got in there? Or realistically, at 29 and with his reputation, he's not likely to be playing for a top team anytime soon?
I think his biggest limiting factor is the fact that due to being so emphasized around his AWP, you basically have to put a lot of the resources in your team into him if he joins your team. He is not a plug and play player. So as a result, you have to basically be willing to ride or die with this guy. And as a result, I do think that, teams who are at the level of the complexities of the world, I think he could play for one of those teams, of course. I think that's fine. He could play with
I'd take him over blind Ricky, fucking Ray Charles over there. I'd fucking have him in a heartbeat.
If we're talking about what Cloud9 want to be, what NRG is, what Team Liquid obviously is much better than, and I don't think he's at that level. I think that time, he's had that time in his career. He got to enjoy a couple of years in some top teams. He had some nice runs now and then. I don't think we're going to see some career revival in that sense. So I think he could certainly be a serviceable veteran player. It's just that unfortunately he has a much more limited number of teams that it would be worth them picking him up for. Like, he's not one of those players. Like, the difference is someone like a Hiko, as long as they're motivated to keep their level decent, you could chuck them in a bunch of teams and they'll be all right. I think this guy probably needs the team has to really like what he's bringing and be willing to gamble on it, basically.
I think I'm kind of in agreement with that. Like I say, I'd love to see him slot into complexity in place of Ricky. I think he could really do a job there. The problem you've got with that is, though, you've got Shazam. So how does that even make sense as a move? Because Shazam has to stay your primary AWPer, I think. I don't know. I think JDM is one of those players. He's in a tough spot because if this was like 18 months ago, I think he gets into a top team and has an opportunity to play at a top level, no problem. Unfortunately, what's happened is we've actually had a consolidation of talent at the top end of the NA scene, and it's a lot harder. You can't just break into those teams on reputation anymore. You got young kids coming through, fucking got that desire, got that fire in their fucking belly. So
it's been way too long since he was on those top teams. Like, to me and you would have said less than 2 years ago. But the problem is 2 years is a long time. Players. They don't give a monkeys about what you did 2 years ago. And I'd even add in as well, like, of all the players in the scene, he's done exactly what his old mate Stanislaw from Team Liquid did. That is the classic mistake: is they have no media presence. If he'd have done some sort of an interview after Team Liquid where he'd explained, maybe the coaching style didn't fit him, or maybe he was going through some personal problems, all of a sudden people have a reason to still think in the back of your mind, maybe you could turn around and be a top player again. If you just go radio silent, then all they remember is your last performance, and your last performance wasn't good, and they just think, shit player. What do I care? Don't know him as a person. I know extra reason to root for him, really. So I feel like in his particular case as well, that was a mistake, because I get why Stanislaw didn't want to be a public figure. He's not a very social guy. He's not the sort of guy who probably even understands why people would need to know what he's thinking. JDM actually could be a very, very popular player. He has a very easygoing attitude, seems like a pretty fun-loving guy. I feel like he could have done a lot more with his profile in that sense, but unfortunately, I get the sense he wanted time off and he actually wanted to take a backseat. So I just think that was misplayed, because if you're someone where your game can't speak for you, speak for yourself then. Get some fans that way. Build a nice little immediate image. Show you're great on camera as well. These are all things that actually count when you go to a team as well. So I think you might have misplayed that.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Now, look, we've got another sort of weird one happening. Look, we were all, well, I mean, say we all, I don't know if it applies to you. It definitely applied to me. I was very excited about the Tai Lu team that got put together, if you remember. It looked like that we actually had, the Asian super team. Now, for whatever reason, it just never worked out. It was just one of those weird instances where it should have been better than what it was.
I've never seen a team that was as bad as them who could have as many good maps.
Yeah.
I feel like, from memory even, I can't ever remember them with this lineup ever, or even the lineup they had just before, ever actually having a really big placing. That was like way back in the last year. You have to go to get them vaguely having good placings. But they would just have a map every now and then. Sometimes a map at every tournament where you'd be like, God damn, that's why I love watching this team play. But you'd be like, never bet any of my fucking money on them in any context whatsoever, though.
No, it was a nightmare in that sense. But they've had this weird, on-off, kind of talk about roster changes coming for a while, and it's just strange because the lineup, the most recent change to this lineup now is that Excurate, or Accurate, depending on which pronunciation you want to adopt, is actually the guy that's been pushed out. And if you remember, I mean, a lot of him and Bentet, the two Indonesian players, a lot of people felt that they were like the dual force that actually kept them in a lot of these matches.
That guy made a lot of impact plays. Just from memory, I can remember so many times he saved their asses, coupled that some clutch, amazing AWPing. Like, seemed like he did generally a pretty good job. Didn't seem like the worst player by any stretch.
No, in fact, but I mean, he was one of the guys that I particularly liked watching, because when he went off with an AWP, he really fucking did. Now, I've heard that they want to put a renewed focus back on having an all-Chinese lineup, or a lineup that speaks Mandarin specifically.
Understandable.
Because they've had communication problems, and it's put a lot of pressure on Bentet, who has to be the translator and stuff, and that's like definitely had an impact on the team. But I mean, I always feel that over time you can work around a language barrier. It's just weird that this team fell flat. Now, the player they're bringing in is to replace Excurate is some 19-year-old Chinese player who is coming from BTRG Imba, called Dan King. I think I've seen him play in a few late night Chinese matches when I'm up bored or whatever, and he looks like a decent player, but again, at 19, playing at the Chinese level, remember, Tai Lu's an international team.
Sure.
So you do not know what you're going to get. Whereas I do know Excurate can tee off against international caliber lineups. So there's that to factor in. But then you also get into this weird situation where they have a backup player who's also the coach, I think, after Jonta, the Ukrainian, left, Freeman, and they're having to play. They can't use Dan King for the Asian minor, but they're not bringing Excurate back. They're going to use Freeman instead. So I don't know what the fuck is going on over at Tai Lu. But, to be the first Asian team that broke into the CSGO top 10 rankings, to be where they are now, and they haven't made wholesale changes, something's very, very wrong. And I think it's really fucking sad because, like you, this was one of the teams I used to love watching. I would always watch a Ty Lue
Even if
game.
they were losing the game, I could enjoy
Yeah.
it. That's the thing,
Yeah.
just because the style was so fucking infectious, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, I don't know what's going on with this whole situation because it you know, according to the last report on HLTV, Freeman is basically like, I don't know, I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup full time. It seems strange. I don't know if that's
the most bizarre part because he was one of the better players in Vichy, basically. So I'm confused as to why, when I first heard that part, I assumed they were trying to do some variant of what Cloud9 was trying to do last time, where you put the player as a coach and somehow you can list him for the major. But as you say, that's apparently not the concept. So I don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, exactly. He's listed as a coach. I'm not saying he is coaching, but obviously you put him down as your coach because that's your substitute player if you do make it to the major.
I mean, I know supposedly they changed how that's supposed to work, but I can't. All that shit's so confusing.
So really, really strange because again, having signed an AWPA in the form of Dan King, you know, that suggests to me he's the long-term replacement for Excurate, but Freeman is a decent player in his own right with a reputation, you know, also a good young player, also 19. So I don't know. I mean, it just seems Ty Lue don't even necessarily have a clear idea. I certainly hope it doesn't spell the end for Bentet because he's not. I mean, he's the best player on the team and doesn't have the linguistic boundaries that seem to be the issue. But maybe it's about more than just language for whatever reason. So maybe they
supposedly he isn't really fluent in Mandarin though. So that's what I was told. So the problem I think in that scenario is that's exactly what I think will probably end up fucking him over in Ty Lue, is that especially if he's now the last person left who is not a fluent Mandarin speaker. If you're in a Chinese team, you either going to have results and they're going to go, right, we'll put up with the situation, or they're probably going to say, let's just get 5 Chinese players or 5 players who speak Chinese together. So I feel like his days probably are numbered with this lineup now, because I would agree. I thought he was one of the revelations when he joined this team. He did a lot to turn around the culture of a team that at the point he joined was becoming very whack. They used to literally just go to tournaments and people would be like, remember when they beat Luminosity? I was like, that was 2 years ago. Stop talking about that now. That has been and gone. But I will say, they never did really get the consistency together with him in the team. So maybe they're going to view it as a cul-de-sac. They shouldn't have gone down and he goes elsewhere. Quite frankly, if Bentet doesn't stay on Ty Lue, I hope he comes to Europe or North America. He's a player who can do it. He has fluent English. So I hope he doesn't feel as though he has to stay within the Asian region unless he just wants to live there.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, he's a player I definitely enjoy watching and think he still has untapped potential. You know, he's only 23. So yeah, definitely a player. I you know, if he is usurped for whatever reason, I certainly hope it doesn't happen like that. But if it does, he's definitely a player I'd like to see play internationally, or just still get another chance with the top team because I think his talent definitely warrants it. Right. So here's another ongoing storyline that was kind of developing. We've been talking a lot about, ESL One Cologne, what the Blast is doing to our professional circuit with the soft exclusivity that they've kind of introduced. And there was a period of time where it looked like we were actually going to have a very lackluster ESL One Cologne attendance because certain teams were sort of electing to opt out of playing there, Team Liquid being the most notable. And there was also some strange situation with G2 where I think they didn't get invited and didn't apply for the qualifier or something. Something went on there anyway.
That was when they claimed it was that was when famously Nell said it was because Shox was getting married or something.
Absolute bullshit.
Apparently nonsense. So yeah,
absolute bullshit.
There was some fuckery though. Clearly.
Yeah, something went on behind the scenes. Anyway, this led to the introduction of a qualifier that basically Team Liquid, because of public backlash and very little else, honestly, decided, okay, we'll play in a qualifier. And then sort of there were some other teams that kind of warranted inclusion, but weren't real contenders. Hellraisers were in there, Sprout were in there, Forza were in there, Team Spirit were in there, and obviously G2 were added to it as well. So obviously, we got the final most people would have expected. Team Liquid taking on G2. And I don't know, this series was, it was all right. I watched... I watched it. Team Liquid were comfortable, as you'd expect throughout. Few signs of promise for a G2, in particular on Nuke. But in general, Liquid very comfortable. Not a surprise. Stewie 2K and Elige getting it done. And this now rounds out, actually, what we've needed all year. Like a super fucking good line.
Remember Counter-Strike, guys? This is what it used to be like.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. I think people have forgotten that we used to have events like this all the time. Let me just read off the list of teams that are here, right? So Team Liquid, obviously. Astralis, ENCE, Fnatic, Na'Vi, Renegades, NRG, Vitality, Furia, Big, FaZe, MIBR, NIP, Mousesports, MVPPK, and Heroic. That's hands down the best event we've had that we're going to have all year. That is all of the top teams, all in one place. And again, it's like I think people have forgotten that is fundamentally what we've been starved of with all of this refresh bullshit.
I believe that is actually the entire top 10 of HLTV right now.
Yeah,
is on there. And then you've got some cheeky little teams after that, like Heroic, etc. They can do some damage, Heroic, obviously. So no, this is the sad thing. You know what? Mark this one down in your book. The little people, can actually beat all the cunts. Only occasionally, but occasionally it can happen, because this is a win for the little people. Because what happened here was, now you understand why I outed that Team Liquid was not going to attend ESL One Cologne at that particular time. I didn't do it when it was all completely 100% done, that they would never in any context be there. But by doing it, and that was just when the stuff with Astralis had heated up to maximum heat, and they were probably looking over at Astralis going, I don't want that fucking scrutiny on me next for the whole Blast thing. And they decided, you know what? Is there a way out of this? And they were told, yeah, you can play the qualifier for a last chance spot. And they did. And thankfully they won it, because in the end, we did get a tournament, a tier 1 tournament with all the biggest teams, crucially, all the top 5 in attendance, something that has not happened since the major. And that is exactly what Blast's soft exclusivity strategy was clearly meant to target. Was meant to be. That's why people never got that. It wasn't just about Astralis skipping events. It was that if Astralis skipped, then yeah, Team Liquid would attend that one. But if Astralis was going, Team Liquid had to not be at that event. And that always held with Team Liquid, Na'Vi, and Astralis up until this one. And this would have been the one that Team Liquid would have skipped. So you would have still had a scenario where actually Blast even would have locked into having the number 1 team skip again, because Astralis would be there, but Team Liquid wouldn't. Well, it just so happens that luckily, this sometimes happens in journalism, you get the story out there fast enough that actually it can fix itself. That, you get ahead of the disaster scenario, and there's chances for the optics to line up so that, yeah, they've taken the steps that have corrected it. So thank God, because it would have sucked so much if only the major was the tournament. That we had gone from major to major with with 0 tournaments with all the top 5 teams. That's why I said, again, this is where I realize if you're someone in the public and you only see what's going on in public, it's easy to take our statements and go, that's a bit hyperbolic. No, the reason I did that tweet saying I will never forgive Refresh and Blast for what they did to this Counter-Strike scene is because they've literally put it so we had like something like a 4 or 5 month span where the kind of tournaments I want to watch didn't exist. There were none. So I've watched Counter-Strike for fucking like almost 20 years, and I had to go half a year, in theory at its peak, with none of the tournaments I want to watch. Like, if you sign up for that, if you love Blast events, have at it. I think that's fucking bullshit, personally. So thank God Team Liquid won this qualifier, and now we have no asterisks next to that tournament. Quite frankly, in the end, they've actually ended up sort of fucking themselves, Blast, because, yeah, they fucked over ESL on a few tournaments. They fucked over DreamHack on a tournament. But in the end, this is how 2019 will be remembered. The most important tournaments were the 2 majors, then ESL Cologne, and then who even gives a fuck on the 4th tournament? We don't know yet. Maybe another one. It won't be anyone from Blast, and it will be one of your main rivals that had the best tournament after the majors.
No, but here's the best part about it as well. Like, you know, I've lost track, dude. And one of the reasons why I wanted to fucking make this podcast a platform to talk about this and talk about it on Twitter and signal boost people that were talking about it was, you know, I've lost track of how many fans, you know, have sent me messages saying, listen, I don't watch Counter-Strike anymore, you know, but I still watch your stuff, or I don't watch Counter-Strike anymore, you know, as a general rule, it's got boring, I'm really struggling. And this isn't just anecdotal evidence from, you know, fans. This is something that we've seen. You know, we've had some decent-ish tournaments that really haven't had the viewership you would expect. Now, it's still kicking the ass of like the Overwatch League and other, you know, big esports out there. You know, even a, you know, DreamHack tournament's doing better than that. But the reality is there have been some reductions in viewership at a time when this is one of the most exciting periods we've had for Counter-Strike for a while.
If this had all the teams at the tournaments, I predict this would have actually been the turnaround. Because obviously the last year or two, we've seen the slight decline of the numbers. I think this would have been the reprieve because it would have been such a straight fire 5 months. Think about it, right? You even see it with the way fans have treated the newer teams, like the Furias and Vitalities that have come up now, have never fully gotten the proper props they deserve. Like, people are still telling me now, you know, yeah, Vitality's good, but why have you now said they're elite? It's like, because everything they've done suggests they're elite. I get it. They couldn't be Astralis, etc. The other tournaments. They weren't there. So I know what you mean. It doesn't feel like they fully matched up, but they were the ones that were active. Same for Furia. They just a flash in a plan, blah, blah, blah. If they'd have done the same results in tournaments that had Astralis, Team Liquid, FaZe, everyone at them, they'd have gotten the plaudits they deserve. So that's the other thing. You've shortchanged the people who did play. They've almost been treated like fucking scabs or something, like they don't deserve their accomplishments. No, it's the other way around. They deserve their accomplishments. The teams who didn't attend those events are the ones who deserve to be fucking chastised.
No, and that's the thing. It's like I said, I think it's just so important to realize that at this time, go look at every other successful big esport out there and look at how often the big teams are playing the big teams. Yes, you can have too much of that. But right now in CS, we've gone completely the other way where it isn't happening enough. And online games, that doesn't count. Like, it's about LAN. It's, you know, that's what the game is. And we're being deprived of that. And it's making the fans go away and go to something else. And
it's made it less interesting for me, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but
I've been interested in my whole life in Counter. Well, not literally, you know, like while the game was around. Obviously, I wasn't like 7 years old. Like, fucking, if they invented Counter Strike, that'd be brilliant, wouldn't they?
No, when I was like, whenever there's a blast on now, I can take or leave it, and the knock-on effect that's had for some of the other tournaments, where it's like, I'll just watch the semis. You know, I never used to be like that. I mean, I used to watch an unreal amount of Counter-Strike, and it's like, this is the first year where I've really been selective, because honestly, you will have to watch a lot of shit, a lot of subpar games with a lot of teams that aren't necessarily going to be narrative relevant, you know, 3 months from now, and also, even when you get the 2 best teams at an event, it could be like the 5th best team taking on the 15th best team in the world, and that's an event final. Well, it's not a very exciting prospect. I'll still tune in for that, sure, but a lot of fans won't. A lot of fans will do something else. So there's been a very detrimental effect. Now, what's going to happen with ESL One Cologne? This is going to be the viewership high point of the year.
Surely.
No doubt. No doubt.
It's got it lined up for everything. Summer, fucking Cologne, all the teams, European times. How can it fail?
Yeah. And it's what I'm saying. I think if you get this huge spike in viewership, let's say we get close to major numbers for ESL One Cologne, which, given that this tournament is ostensibly a major.
Yeah, it's going to help as well.
Yeah.
There's the other factor.
Yeah. And it's the 20th anniversary of Counter-Strike, and I urge, because I know occasionally the CSGO devs do watch this, I urge you, please, 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 whatever beef you've had with ESL in the past, for the good of your game, for the good of this community, please push ESL One Cologne onto your fucking game so it's there on your client. I don't care what you have to do. bang the fucking drums, because this is as good as CSGO is going to be in 2019.
Yes.
As good as the major
This is the battle for the night, mate. Everyone's got to come together. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So I know ESL and you have had your differences, but if this game gets a huge spike in viewership and you can tie it in with some in-game promotion, something, and I know there's not a lot of fucking time to get this together, this can be a rallying point, a change, because right now, we're not dying. We're nowhere near dead, but we all know it. We've all seen the slow petering out of interest that's happening because there are too many cooks in the kitchen right now, and we need Valve, as always, to come in and be the fucking adults in the room. So please, everybody has to push the importance of ESL 1 Cologne. I know ESL might to a lot of people still be the evil empire. Right now, that's the event that saves Counter-Strike. 100%.
And also, if you are someone who, I mean, it was only a few years, we're talking like 4 years ago. If you remember when it was ESL were the ones pushing for their own exclusivity and their own leagues and their own path towards owning Counter-Strike as a competitive franchise, pretty much. Remember, them being basically denied that, cut off at a few key points, and then forced to come away from that is a good thing. It shows that the community could actually course correct. We could fix these things. So someone like Blast can very much come back into the fold and be another tournament organizer, even the best tournament organizer, if they do the appropriate steps. So I consider it a good thing within our community that, unlike all those other games, which quite frankly are just dev tyrannies, you actually can have sort of like the scene itself can course correct. And so that's it. So just as ESL now doesn't seem like a malicious entity, they don't seem like someone fucking with everyone. Now, to be fair, they're probably held in check, which is what you want. That's the world I want to live in, because basically, just like in society in general, the best approach generally seems to be you want people to act in their own self-interest, but then enough people every now and then to look past their self-interest and hold the bigger forces at check. And therefore, we get to have an ecosystem. It isn't just one company. Because as soon as it becomes one company, yeah, sure, just like in a monarchy, you could have a brilliant king. You also could have an absolute cunt who could ruin everything. So I'll always go with what the Counter-Strike scene has been up until now over the other alternatives I've seen put forwards.
And just while we're on that topic, as I said, obviously 20th year anniversary of the existence of Counter-Strike. I haven't got around to doing my tweet yet. Everyone, so everyone who's works in Counter-Strike's done a tweet about how it changed their lives and stuff. And I think me and you, we're just two grumpy old men.
I know, I don't give a fuck. I don't even say happy birthday to my friends, mate. I assume they just know I'm glad they're alive and just get on with it. It's the idea that's what goes through my head 5 minutes before I go to say, didn't they say happy birthday? Sure he knows, I'm glad he's alive. So, well.
Yeah. Well, anyway, right? I'm gonna do my tweet. I urge you to do the same. May as well, eh? But anyway, they did do an update, and look, I still think Valve's handling of CS:GO leaves a lot to be desired. But we only really think that because we've got Dota 2 to look over at. And again, I say it all the time. If you're a CS:GO fan and you're whining about how Valve hates your game and you're the stepchild of the relationship, go talk to TF2 fans. Just go talk to them. TF2 was the testing ground for everything. It was the testing ground for what became basically the boxes, the keys, the hats, the in-game cosmetics, like all sorts of changes. And they would take that out and drop it into Dota and take that out and drop it into CS:GO. And they got very little of the love back, despite being a critically acclaimed, super popular game. That's still right up there, actually, in the charts, despite everything. So yeah, TF2 fans look over at CS:GO and go, why can't we be them? So, the grass is always greener. But look, I will definitely say it would have been nice to have some sort of bigger announcement than the one we got. But it was an announcement nonetheless. And what they did is they put out a retro version of Dust 2, the classic Dust 2 map. They released an in-game casual with the chickens in, which is funny because obviously, while we all love the chickens in a way, that should be out of the game. Like, there's no place for the fucking chickens in the game, especially because we've seen a couple of instances where chickens have stopped a fucking door opening or something stupid. But whatever. But people love the chickens apparently. So I thought that was nice. I'd like to see them do a bit more. But the fact that for their 20th anniversary they did something where it was actually conceivable that maybe they would have just done a tweet or something else. They actually did something palpable in the game. I think that's a good sign. I'll also add as well, I see more interactivity from CSGO dev these days. And even in this change that they made, because they also made adjustments to the org, which people have been calling for ages. They actually tagged Nico into it because Nico has been saying he won't use the org. The org's a noob gun.
This fuckled me. This absolutely.
Yeah, no, this is what I mean. This is brilliant, right?
This.
Like Nico has been like fucking fuck the org, and then realized if you can't beat him, you gotta fucking join him. Starts using the org, and then literally like a week after he starts picking it up and getting used to it. Yeah, we're gonna nerf the org, and they tagged Nico in the announcement they were doing org nerfs, and Nico was like, CS:GO devs fucking trolling me here. And the brilliant thing is, yes, they absolutely are. They're watching this going, fuck, you're never getting a gangbang with him. Has he picked up the org yet? That was the only reason we haven't nerfed it. Get wrecked, you cunt. And I actually like that. Because this is the first time in a long time I actually feel like Valve are kind of watching what the competitive community is saying to some degree. I mean, that might not be true. Maybe my perceptions are inaccurate. But they've been more active on Twitter. They've been more active at tagging people, talking to people, getting ideas again. Yeah, it's good. And it turns out, I think this is a good update as well. What are your thoughts?
Also, just fucking hilarious in the context that, as you say, Nico was just complaining like, this shit's obviously OP. And
I know.
Obviously, everyone was just saying to him the obvious thing, wasn't it? Well, why don't you use it then, Nico?
Yeah,
if it's OP. And he was like, nah, it's not even that good. It should be nerfed anyway any minute now. Anyway, whatever. I'll just keep complaining that's OP, but refusing to use it for my team to help them succeed. And most of his team, even bizarrely, seemed to follow his suit and like refuse to use it because I think in their minds, they really assumed like if people like them were to complain it's OP, surely it will be immediately nerfed. It's like, will you grow the fuck up? Like, by that logic, let's just nerf the Deagle because you're really good with it. Like, no, the game doesn't work that way. We balance on other factors. But I like the way Nico's approach to professionally playing Counter-Strike is the same approach I always had in League of Legends, why I always found it a very unsatisfying game, which is when they release the new champion in League, it's always when it's the most busted, isn't it? It's like every ability's sick, the scaling's probably way off. Like, it probably has like a passive that should be a fucking ability with a cost on it. And, like everything's broken. Well, because I still have that mentality, I'm getting over it a little bit now. Where even as much as like a few years ago, I still wouldn't spend any money in any game. So because technically in League, you can just grind and get the points and just get the thing for free. I would never buy the champion when it came out. So by the time I got it and I'd been wrecked about 50 times and I'd played whatever, the 60 games, it'll take me over a year to get that fucking champion. I would get it like, right, finally, let's see how OP this is.
Now it's my turn to play
nerfed to fuck by then. And I'd be like, what? And I'd be trying to use it in games doing the shit people have been doing. I mean, obviously none of it worked. I was like, this is fucking garbage.
Why is my Niddly Spear doing 100 damage? Used to do 2,000.
But the difference is, like, I'm just playing the game for fun. You're an actual professional, Nico. You're like the second best player in the world. What the fuck is this shit?
No, but I remember.
It's actually hilarious.
It was like, wasn't it the NIP players with the CZ? Didn't they do that too? We're
not
going to use the CZ.
Freiburg and all those guys used to say, like, CZ, it's just garbage, isn't it? It's like, well, you could just use it to win all that money, though, couldn't you? Nah, I'm better than that. It's like some sort of like moral fucking statement. Like, I wouldn't want to win that way, to sully my reputation. Like, shut the fuck up.
Like the English refusing to use crossbows or something at the start. No, we will use the longbows.
No, but like, just as a rule, by the way, just for casual players, I mean, and this applies to any game. At any given time in like a MOBA and in CS:GO too, there'll be a gun, there'll be a champion, there'll be something that's busted as fuck. And if you're serious about climbing in the ranks or whatever,
you abuse the fuck out of it.
You abuse the fuck out of it because that's what MMR, that's what ranking systems are. It's not a reflection of your overall skill. It's a reflection of your consistency over a prolonged time period being impactful in games. That's what it is. And you can bet your ass that your fucking opponents will use it against you if you don't use it against them. So, That's just that's the way it goes. So the idea that I think everybody would agree with that about like solo queue, right? In matchmaking. The idea that people would then literally fucking say, but I'm a pro, so not going to use the busted thing. While you're getting your fucking head banged off with an AUG. Like, imagine the hubris of that as your team gets banged out of a tournament again.
It's the idea.
All your fans are crying. You walk past and go, at least I didn't use the AUG, bitches. Like, no, fuck that.
No, and then what about this angle as well? You're in a massive game, right? Think about FaZe Clan. It's a close game. It was a really back and forwards game. At the end of the game, right, you turn around to Nico and you go, you know what, lads? We lost, but I feel like we can hang our hats on this one, We gave it our all, did it all. In the end, what more could we have done? And one of them's just looking down going, well, and then he just goes, absolutely nothing, right? You agree? Nothing, right? Adren goes, you know what? I've only been here a few months, but I'm going to speak up on this one, Nico. You need to get over your ego. You need to get that. And Adren has been removed from FaZe Clan. And washed up Neo is here. Like, all right, Neo, you speak fluent English and never have a word to say about the AUG, do you? Damn right, son. Right, welcome into...
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, that was all a skit. Any likeness or character that was presented there was purely fictional and didn't in any way represent the real Nico, the guy who refused to use the AUG until it was nerfed.
So, yeah. So I think it's a step in the right direction. Like I've still been enjoying Counter-Strike, honestly. Like when the top teams have been playing and the
I haven't found the AUG ruined my enjoyment.
Nah, I was just gonna say. I mean, listen. I think I've seen like Config was it tweet out like the AUG shouldn't be in Counter-Strike or something like that, and it's like, well, it's been there for a pretty long time, homie. So definitely should be in the game. It's just that in its current form, yes, it was giving an advantage in particular.
It was probably slightly overpowered. I agree.
Yeah. It was at LAN especially. It was making maps that were balanced, lean more towards
the telling point to me.
We saw that,
and this is really like you can use this metric generally. Is when the people who themselves are good with the weapon admit it is a bit overpowered. I'd maybe tone this down or tone that down. That's when you usually know, like, come on, like even they're saying it. Like, so when as you said, like the Team Liquid players, I've seen Elige many times discuss potentially balancing the AUG. This guy's one of the best AUG players we've got. He's fucking amazing with that gun. His spray is one of his best strengths. Like if he's willing to sort of give up and say, I'll meet you halfway, we can nerf it a bit. That's probably a more reasonable one than Nico just going, bloody OP as fuck. All right, show me all your clips then. I don't use it personally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What is that? That's the worst argument you've ever made, isn't it?
That is bad. That is a bad one.
What a ludicrous argument. Wait a minute, it's not just that you're just not that good with it, is it? No, what are you talking about? My dick's massive. I mean, I'm fine with it all.
But yeah, so a good update. I'm going to be interested. I just hope it doesn't go to a point where we just end up back where we were before the devs made any changes. Because, look, I like it when there's a little curveball in there now and then. And the one thing the community has to be super cautious about is discouraging the devs from making any changes to the game because it'll stagnate. Like it's like I say, it's why I support Vertigo being in the map pool, even though I fucking hate that map.
Just the principle.
Yeah, it's the principle.
Try something new, bring something completely brand new. Yeah. It's not bad premise.
So, just one other thing. I don't know if you want to talk about it too much. There was Snappy is in free agency.
You know what, mate? All I'm going to say is this. You go back up a couple of years when it was the tough times in North. Things were going badly. Everyone was blaming MSL for kicking all the players that had good tournaments. All the fun that we all remember. And everyone used to say, you know what? What this North team needs, this snappy guy who's turned this heroic team into someone good. And I used to think, are they right though? Because the problem is I always thought like MSL himself only failed when he got to that level where he had the expectations to win the tournaments and all the rest. Like Snappy, it's not like he did that in heroic, but then again, he also hadn't been given the tools of a North. Well, the problem is we don't need to ever have that discussion again for 1 second in our lives, because not only did Snappy get a lineup as good as almost any North lineup in Optic, he had a whole bunch of talent. Cajun B, Config, Yogi, like these are real players to work with. He even then got some of the signings he wanted. He got his old mate Nico over. He got Refresh in the team. We got to see what the experiment's like when MSL runs the same team but a worse version because it has Snappy in it. And MSL's version with Snappy in it was better than the best one that Snappy had without MSL in it. That's end of story. Anyone who was ever on that train doesn't even exist anymore. He was never a train driver. That was all in your mind. Exactly.
Classic Ghost Train. Was a great kids show that not a lot of people probably remember with Gilbert. Do you remember the alien with the snotty nose?
Oh, yes, I do remember that now. Yeah. It was really disgusting, though, because it did have, like, actual, like, mucus coming out, didn't it?
Yeah, that was the thing.
Because it was like one of those horror movie type special effects, wasn't it? Like a Baker-esque, I'd even dare to invoke in your presence.
Yeah, well, yeah, be careful with it. But anyway, so, look, I agree. I think what history has shown us, because, like, what's mad is I didn't realize he was in fucking Optic for 13 months.
It's a long
13 months.
Yep.
13 months as a failing in-game leader in a big org. That's wild.
Think about it, right?
Wild. Listen. That is wild as fuck.
Cadian, it feels like he was in North a long time, doesn't it? He wasn't even in that long. What was he in? Like 8 months, 6 months? I don't know. Something like that, right? Feels like it. So Snappy absolutely got his chance. And as I say, he had all the rotations of players. So, and I'll just say this. Look at, since MSL joined Optic, look at Config's form and then go look at Config when he played on Snappy. Like, sorry, it was night and day. Like, one of them now looks again like one of the best players. The other guy, actually, no one even was bringing his name up. He wasn't even getting mentioned in those conversations of making teams and bringing people to the FaZe clans of the world. That's how far his stock had dropped.
Yeah, and I think what history is going to show us is that, look, the achievements of that particular heroic lineup that Snappy was in were pretty good, all things considered. Sure. I mean, nobody had like any particular high hopes from them. They were always sort of relevant, you know, always competitive. They really punched above their weight. But you do get teams like that in all sports where it's like a perfect storm. And then what you have to do, you watch them kind of like fade away as various parts go to other teams, like Wimbledon is an example in if you go back to the golden age of the Premier League. There was one season they got 7th in the fucking league, and these were all like journeyman players, but they came together. They had an ethos, they had an ethic, they had an identity, they had a style. They were all on the same page, and they were a tough fucking team to play, even if you were supposed to be one of the teams that was going on to win the title. Heroic were like that. Heroic were a Wimbledon. Now, what happens is when those players from fucking Wimbledon start going to other fucking teams, they never live up to it. They can never do it again. Their teammates sort of have different ideas. Maybe they're a bit more cultured. Maybe they're not as direct. Maybe there's higher expectations, more pressure. It's all this combination of things. And unfortunately, I agree with you. I think 13 months in an organization that backed you to the hilt, made roster changes for you, let you bring in players you'd worked with before, never cut you, never seemed to put any pressure on you, even gave you an opportunity to
went to plenty of lands as well. Went to a lot of lands.
And sent you to events, and you fucking flopped every time. Unfortunately, this is a massive stain on your copybook as an in-game leader. Yep. And with Snappy being 29, I don't know if we see him get another chance to manage players that good and play that well. So I don't know. While he's in free agency, I think obviously someone somewhere will pick him up. I don't think it's going to be a tier 1 team. I don't think justifiably it can be, sadly.
No, and I'd also just, again, I mean, I won't do a massive version, but I'll give a quick version for anyone who's never seen the show before. But I will now reference a concept I've brought up many, many times about in-game leaders, which is basically the concept of the small club manager from football, which is I like the kind of team actually that Richard was talking about there, like a Wimbledon. Obvious more recent examples would be Leicester City or Fulham if we're going the last 20 years. These are teams where the idea is when the team does well, you know what? I've no doubt that the manager probably had a lot to do with it. He probably did craft a style. He probably did get a player in a role he's never played before. He probably did develop some young talent. The problem is that the manager also tends to get snapped up. He tends to go to a big club. You'll get a big club who's a little bit on hard times and think, you know what, this young, fresh blood, that's what we need to do, turn around the culture here. And the problem is, as you'll know from most of the examples I just gave, those managers can't make the jump up. They are only, what you find out is their skill set is only getting a guy who's never played before and getting him match fit. getting a player who was slightly out of position and putting him in a different player. When you then give them the best players and you go, right, forget finding a winger in your team. I've given you the national team winger. There you go. What you find is they don't then have the requisite skill set to work with that caliber of player, which is about like ego management. It's about not just putting someone in a good position, making them the best player at their position, about making your team so devastating with tactics you can destroy any opponent. A totally different skill set, basically. So I would guess if Snappy wants to keep playing, he can probably go back down the ladder. I don't know that he'll ever come back from it, but he can go down and he can be on a team that's like 20th in the world, 25th in the world, 30th. I mean, nowadays it's getting even more crazy in terms of the rankings. If you go and look, suddenly there's teams 20 to 30 that aren't a joke you look at. So he's in a tough spot right now. I don't think he'll be able to work his way back up. He'll probably get a chance again. The problem is, as you say, it's not like this feels like he had one chance at the top and he blew it. That's not even one chance when it's 13 months, especially with, as I said, the circumstances are different. He didn't come in like KD into North, where it's like a pre-existing team. You're just thrown into the mix. You probably don't have many options for signings. No, you came in with a lineup that, as I said, someone like an MSL should have been like, that's a brilliant team. Give me that right now. I'll go fucking maybe win a tournament. So for me, this was a pretty egregious failure. I won't put it all on him. I guess, yes, players probably didn't perform.
Maybe and a lot of noise around Optic, a lot of bullshit. Yeah,
there's some nonsense there, certainly. But for what we know of what he did in his role, I can't say he did well. It feels like a failure.
Well, I mean, it's punctuated, isn't it? Because I'll segue into talking about DreamHack Open Summer. We'll just have a momentary lament for what DreamHack Summer used to be. And what it is now. Okay, good. That's over. I mean, the teams at this event, compared to past events, you've got Winstrike, you've got Chaos, you've got one of the worst rebrandings in esports history. The old fucking team. What are they called now? Crazy with a 4 in them. Like yes. Fuck that. You had a Vanguard there, Aristocracy, Tricked, Ancient, and Optic. So really, really like weak field. Shows as well, we've had a little bit of diminishing returns on the CIS teams that looked so good at one point. You know, Vanguard only getting 5th to 6th here. Still got James, still got Quicket. That's a bit weird. Then you had Winstrike with Edward. Well, they ain't looked like much at all. They've definitely gone backwards. Teams like Forza are pulling ahead of them right now. But anyway, that's all stuff for another day. We're not going to dwell on that. Optic won it. They finished first. They beat Ancient reasonably comfortable. I mean, I'd say Ancient gave a good account of themselves. That's Ancient, the Swedish team with Plopsky on it, who's obviously just joined NIP. But yeah, there you have it. I mean, Optic went to this event, and sure, I think they were hands down favorites to win it. But you know, look, they've got their own stuff going on. You know, we've talked about Config. Where's he been? We've talked about this new player Tezes. That they've brought in. This is a player that doesn't have a huge tenure in a top level Counter-Strike. So, this could have been a potential banana skin. And I do feel that if this was a Snappy lineup, they would have got found out. They would have got. But as it happens, MSL was able to steer them to a very decent tournament win for them, which eclipses, I think the only one that they won before was Copenhagen Games, right? With Snappy.
Oh, with Optic, they won almost fuck all. So I can't even think of anything they won.
Yeah, I think they might have won a Copenhagen Games in there where they beat the Imperial, or they might have finished runners up at that one. But anyway, they definitely made it to a Copenhagen Games final. I'm pretty sure about that. But anyway, so this is a decent sized tournament win for them. Whatever you say about the field, DreamHacks are always going to have a certain allure, a certain stature. And let me tell you, I watched the final and against Ancient. Just actually really positive signs, because I agree with you. I think this is a team that is an inferior lineup compared to some of the ones Snappy had to work with. But Nico looked good, had a great series in the final, all tournament. Finally refreshed, looked like he'd had some guidance, made some unbelievable clutches. And I still love this kid and think he's going to be big. And MSL's probably the guy to get him there and finish his development. Config, as you said, is sort of getting back amongst it. And you know what? MSL continues to show that, he's actually improved a lot of his own personal game. So sure, this was very much a tier 2 field. but you can only win the tournaments you attend, and it's sort of the ultimate full stop on just how depressing the Snappy era is. And hilariously, of course, all for nothing because this Optic team are going to be all in free agency, be it as a roster themselves because of the rules with the Optic having been acquired by the Immortals Gaming Club conglomerate. Well, they own MIBR, don't they? So we all know that if you want to play nice with Valve's rules, scant though they are, you can't own 2CS teams that were likely to attend Valve events, or ESL reinforced that as well. So ultimately, this will be the team that gets cut. So you win a tournament, you make all these improvements, might all be for nothing because there's no guarantee that this team could even stay together as a 5. So pretty depressing all round if you're an Optic fan, and for MSL as well, I'd say.
I agree with the Optic fan one. Here's the thing. If you're MSL, like, sadly, yes, obviously he has never really had the name value that probably he deserves. But I will say this. Right now, if I was a team like Cloud9, hey, if I could pick up MSL and Config, that's the fucking start of a team right there. That ain't a bad little move right there. That's a gamble that could be worth it. So I will say this about MSL. Nobody, and this is a great way to phrase it, nobody misrates MSL more than the people who say shit. I agree. You know what? All of us that like him as a player probably end up overrating him because every time he gets a team good and they have the upset wins and then the upset wins get more and more consistent and they maybe win even a tournament is when we're like, right, now he's going to take the step up and he's going to become a truly legendary in game league. He's going to become a Karrigan, a Glaive. And he's never made that leap. He's never been able to actually bridge that gap. That's where he always falls back. That's where the fucking tide rolls back. And he's never made it beyond that. But the people who go the other way, and because he's not exactly a super charismatic person, and he's never really been a very front-facing person beyond his tweets, which were probably regrettable and ill-informed in many occasions, sadly, he's been underrated criminally in many occasions. And every time he's been out of a big team, people want to be like, he was shit anyway, just throw him out, he's worthless. And every team this motherfucker's been on, you can't stop players on the team saying, yeah, he was a good in-game leader. Actually, he did a good job. He ran the team well. Like, there's almost no one in the scene who talks shit about MSL. The only person was Config, and that was mainly just like banter anyway, wasn't it? Like, there's no one who comes out and says he's a bad in-game leader. So I do think he's been criminally underrated, even though I'll agree at times he was criminally overrated by some of the more knowledgeable people in the scene. I think both sides of the community have to take an L on that one to some degree. But as you've seen from this team, a very competent in-game leader, a guy who up until the absolute top tier level is absolutely within his comfort zone to be a good in-game leader, to run a squad. So that you will always have a place as a in terms of a career if you can be that kind of player. I agree. If you gave me the Astralis lineup and said, do you want MSL as the leader? I'd probably say no. But if you give me any other lineup than Astralis, yeah, I'd probably give it a go. I think he's shown time and time again what an underrated quality he has as an in-game leader.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, he's not quite there for me as one of the true greats, but he ain't fucking far off. I mean, seriously, like, he's next in line. You know, so example...
That's kind of an underrated resume for someone who isn't a great, actually.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm saying. It's like, hey, look, if we go through all of the great in-game leaders throughout fucking CS history, you know, especially if we start including like 1.6 and stuff, there are going to be a lot of names ahead of MSL. Sure. But the reality is, especially in the landscape right now, as we've moved away from more in-game leader-driven teams and projects, MSL's like pretty fucking good. I mean, you know, maybe not great, but pretty fucking good. He's got a proven track record. Every team he goes to seems to improve. You know, he's got his quirks, but eventually he'll be in that Hall of Fame one day. Because who else are you going to put in?
Agreed.
That's the reality of it. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think MSL exists in this weird twilight where, like, people know he's good, but people don't want to give him the plaudits as being great. Yeah, that might be a little bit harsh because, like I said, I think he's done great work with Optic, and hopefully they can stay together as a 5 and get a good sponsorship. But I don't know how interested the Immortals Gaming Club conglomerate are in facilitating that. There was another event this weekend, and it's important, even though I guarantee you probably didn't watch it, or maybe you
did.
Was happening. What, you watched the Mocha XL Esports 2019?
Who made the final?
Well, Existence, of course.
You think I don't know about this tournament? You think I'm not aware that Existence just outplaced loads of top players and teams that you'll all be loving? You know that Fury Esports?
I thought you'd got over him.
You know you're all riding that Fury Esports dick, don't you? I tell you who places ahead of him. Existence Online.
Right. Well, no, but this is why I wanted to talk about this. So, Furia, right, this team that we're waxing lyrical about, amazing team, best team in Brazil, one of the most exciting young upcoming teams we've got in Counter-Strike right now. What we talked about is because they have this unique style, this aggressive style, this style where basically like a lot of what Able J does is like some mad sacrificial, like suicidal component to the tactics where people are like, well, he can't really be doing that. Like there must be someone to trade, or it must be an execute. Like, you know, it puts everyone off kilter. They're just great to watch. But the question we asked is, like, now that people are taking them seriously, what happens when dedicated in-game leaders and coaches and analysts start breaking down their style? And what does their plan B look like when they get found out? Well, look, I don't know if they're a little bit tired or whatever, but when I saw this, XL Esports 2019 event in Lisbon, I looked at it and I was like, you know what? Actually, this might be better than the DreamHack event that was sort of going on at the same time.
It's not a bad lineup of teams, all in all.
No, yeah, I mean, you had Virtus Pro, right?
Doesn't look that sick, but there's some beyond that.
You had Virtus Pro there. I was curious to see what the fuck's going on, but since they brought in the new polls, you got Big there. Right,
it was an interesting team.
Yeah, I need to know where the fuck they're at, especially with all this talk about maybe Smoothie going back to them. You got Furia there, obviously. I'll watch them play anyone. I don't give a fuck. And then Windigo. Now, we've been talking a lot about Windigo. Like, you've had these, they're one of the highest earning prize money teams this year.
Yes, of course.
Because of the WASG win, which was $500,000. And they've had some good results and beaten some good teams. Actually, this was way more appealing to me than the DreamHack event in a lot of ways. But yeah, so they came up against Gamer Legion. Now, Gamer Legion, I think, as we said at the time, I think even you laughed about it, despite being an Existence lover. This is like, it's not even a retirement home. It is like just, I don't know. It's like the tide where bodies wash up. I mean, it's like that. It's like Screams in there. Existence is in there. HS is in there. No rhyme or reason. Hampus is in there. Nork is in there. It's Swedes. It's Estonians. It's Belgians. What the fuck is going on with this team? But let me tell you, if there's one guy I will trust to fucking disseminate your demo and find your weaknesses, it's Existence. And they played Furia, and they didn't just beat them, they beat them 2-0. And they beat them on Inferno and Vertigo, yeah. Which we've seen Furia be willing to play Vertigo, leave it in there. We see Furia fancy themselves on Inferno. So once again, you have to take your hat off to Existence and say, like, this is a guy who can do a number on these teams that have, like, unique play styles. And I just wonder if this sort of demo being out there, these two demos, particularly for these two maps, Inferno being a pick by Furia, whether or not this could really start to test the mettle of this team and be where we find out, can this team get to that next level? Can they get to top 5? Can they be genuine?
You've got to figure 100% that demo must be on the computer of Zonic and Glaive.
Oh, right 100%, now, yeah.
100%. Think about it, they just lost to them at a LAN. The first thing you're going to do when you hear they lost the series is let's get those demos immediately, break them down. If Existence figured out something that beat them, well, surely we've got even better pieces. We can destroy these motherfuckers.
And it's a real interesting time because remember, just as we said, who's at ESL 1 Cologne? Well, Furia. Yeah. This should have been a layup for them. This should have been Furia, win first tournament.
It's like what you said about a Vanguard. Yeah, that's the problem. When you have that's always this way in Counter-Strike. It's an interesting phenomenon. When you're a team that's like a low top 10 team and you have the big placing, you make a top 4, you make a nice run. People always think, right, well, if you take that team and you put them down a level, they'll just win the tournament and they'll show that they were that. And it doesn't always work that way. Like sometimes, for example, maybe your style works better against the better teams. Maybe it's actually weaker against teams you don't know at all. Could absolutely believe that entirely. So I'll throw in as well, this just, again, kind of like the MSL one, this just shows the value of having legit experienced in-game leaders, because this isn't a team from Gamer Legion that should be doing real damage. Like, it shouldn't go anywhere beyond this. This should be the high point that this team ever has. But as you saw when he was on LDLC, as you saw now, even occasional flashes on the G2 night, which was generally underwhelming, they were still able to get these wins that their team had no business getting and have performances they had no business. And part of that's because one thing you at least do have in the team is someone who can break down opponents' demos, who can at least set up his own team, who can at least run a practice, can make sure we have a playbook of stuff to run. So I'm not going to go too ham on it, but I did think it was certainly interesting for the people who are the Furia haters and wanted to see them like taken down a little peg. I also think it could end up being a great thing for them. Better to lose now in a meaningless tournament and get like kind of like rebuffed by what could happen in the scene, rather than that happen when you do go head to head at ESL Cologne with, you know, one of the big names and then getting humiliated publicly.
And look, here's the thing that also makes me feel that this was a work by existence, and that he was able to put on a clinic in breaking down demo, because they hands down just had Furia's number. Nothing that was working that we were talking about at the previous tournament at ECS with Furia was working here. And honestly, Furia is a better team and has a better caliber of player and should have won, but they were just nothing, you know, just wasn't quite there. There was just some great reads and rotates. The Gamer Legion get to the final where they have to play Windigo, where, you know, I'm not too sure Existence could think that far ahead in the tournament. They knew if they beat Offset, they would play Furia because of the way the tournament
and Offset was the local team.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sure they did as much prep as they could for a fucking local Portuguese team that, you know, they might not have seen play a lot, and certainly didn't have a lot of demos to draw from. I'm sure though they absolutely prepared for Furia, and then in Windigo,
think how many tournaments Furia's just been to. Haven't they done like 3 tournaments in a row?
Exactly,
so
on the spin.
Demos to work with are mental. Meanwhile, even if Furia wanted to, what could you see from Gamer Legion? What, that shit Charloy tournament in France where they got banned, or some online games? You don't even have anything to work with yourself.
Yeah, so and obviously as well at the other end, they couldn't possibly know how it was going to go in terms of who they were going to play in the finals, right? Because Virtus Pro were playing big. Well, you know, that could have been a coin toss, right? And then Windigo come in. Well, who are they even playing, and who's got the chance to beat them? So I think that's why they got absolutely battered in the final by Windigo. Existence. I just don't think he could have realistically prepared, and I think honestly that's the team's true level when Existence isn't micromanaging the fuck out of everyone and has demos to break down and is fully prepped for you, because they got 16-3'd on Train and 16-8 on their map pick, Dust 2, and Windigo just looked dominant in every way, shape, and form, and won the whole tournament. But yeah, just an interesting test for Furia, because now it becomes not just the reality of the demos being out there and the fact that they are mortal because they lost the ECS final and now they lost the layup at this Portuguese event, but also how do you bounce back when you've got the biggest tournament, you know, the week after this. So, you know, pretty excited to see if they can bounce back or whether it's going to start making them look mortal. Now, just quickly, and then we'll do questions and wrap it up. At the start of the show, I did talk a little bit about match fixing. And listen, I'm just going to bring this up again because it's something of mine. There was the Esports Integrity Coalition. I work with them kind of as a, you know, consultant or representative or whatever you might want to call it. You know, I know them all very well. You know, spoke at the annual general meeting last year. I think they're doing good work in the space and trying to stamp down, you know, stamp out corruption and match fixing and whatnot. They did a press release today that basically said, you know, match fixing is up 75% than last year. Now, look, before we get too alarmist, that was a divide across all games. Counter-Strike was the second highest in that game. Of the games that were listed. But, you know, we're not talking about Tier 1 Counter-Strike. And this was based on them discovering suspicious betting patterns around Counter-Strike. Now, we all know no top team is going to throw a game for peanuts when they make so much money and there's so much money coming in at the top level. Where you start having the problem is this tier 2, this tier 3. And there was an instance that, people tweeted it at me. And I just want to give my thoughts about this without even necessarily condemning anyone or accusing anyone. But a lot of people DM me this stuff about this team. I think it's pronounced Simon, but it might be Seaman, which I don't want to say, but Syman. And this is like a team that certainly have shown that they're capable of, getting decent results. But they had one of the games against it was a Sparta, and their bets got cancelled because of suspicious betting activity. That there was a sudden abnormal shift, and everybody suddenly backed the underdog. And if you go and look at some of the things that happened in that game, it's very, very bizarre. I've got a clip actually, so if you want to see. Now, to put it in context with this Simon team, this is a team that, they beat Windstrike, I think, recently. Like they should be a capable side. So I'm not accusing them of anything, but then you see clips, and to me, somebody who remembers having the horror of breaking the story about iBuyPower and trying to show people clips exactly like this, and people going, Richard, no, they're just messing around. It's just a bit of fun. It's really eerily reminiscent of that.
I even hear that to this day, as I've often mentioned with the whole Skadoodle angle, where I always say, so you're just cool with Skadoodle not opening that match. And they're like, listen, Thorin, they were trying different things out at the time. He wasn't going to be the AWP. It's like, as someone who can go that far, cannot be reasoned with, basically.
So do you want a 3, 2, 1 this clip?
All right.
Yeah, I'm ready.
So we can all watch it at the same time? Yeah.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Kit to speak of. So it is going to come down.
Like, why is he just standing there still? There's no pro player doesn't repeat properly on that. Come on.
And look, that's not just that's not just the only moment in that game. It is fraught with other little moments if you go through.
That's what kills me, by the way. This is what kills me about this topic. Is it would be one thing if we were talking about very, very tough to judge games that were real games. Yeah. And did he really give that one? That could easily be accounted for by a bad flash. There's two things that kill me about these match fixing scenarios. One, the betting patterns make it blatantly fucking obvious, because the only way to fix right now at Counter-Strike is to have the team that's the favorite lose. So what you do is you wait till the team that's the favorite is a massive favorite, and then you go all in for the short-term gain of the big-time bet. That's immediately a very worrying sign, because it makes it seem very blatant. And then secondly, the sheer number of times that exact number one scenario happens, and then I look at the game and I see ridiculous clips like this, it's like, why do both have to happen? Like what that tells you, by the way, is nobody's hiding it, because nothing happens to them. They can do whatever the fuck they want. Nobody is watching. Nobody's coming. That's the problem. There will always be match fixing in every sport and every discipline. It's just normally they at least have to be smart about it. They at least have to find a game where maybe we can have this 60-40 team losing. The betting's reasonable, so we can put our cheeky bet in. They at least do it smart. When they do it like this, they're just being blatant.
Yeah, listen, and again, I'm not saying it definitely was. But like you say, it's got the hallmarks of weird clips like this.
It's got both of those factors going hard.
Yeah, it's got the massive. Time. Like I say, when a betting platform like Pinnacle decides to basically cancel all the bets,
which would, remember, in a legit game, be their dream bet is that loads of idiots want to bet on the underdog. That's their dream. That's how they make money.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, and I've said this multiple times as well. Events like this shouldn't be on a betting platform. They just shouldn't
Agreed.
be. Teams like
You can't
Simon
control
and,
it.
Yeah, teams like Simon and Espada playing in the Loot.bet Smack My Beach CIS qualifier. So a qualifier for a very small tournament anyway should not be on any betting platform. These games are the ones that get fixed. Yeah, we're all laughing at Smack My Beach.
No, God bless that company that still thought in 2019, Smack My Beach. Yeah, why not? Fucking get me out.
Smack my beach cup, lads. Smack my beach cup.
Beach cup. Yeah, it's unacceptable, isn't it? But yeah, you know what I mean? It's like it's ridiculous that these games are on betting platforms. They shouldn't be. All the recommendations from ESIC, all the recommendations from any mainstream sports lawyer is that you mustn't offer cash betting on these games because these are the ones that get fucking tampered with. And listen, I wrote an article a long time ago back when I was working on a website that we shouldn't talk about.
Yeah, I fucking hate the Daily Dot.
Yeah, same. It was the other one. It was the other extremists, apparently. But yeah, got him. But anyway, I wrote an article there where I was like saying, and this was back when, I don't know if you remember, we had all the German motherfuckers from Killerfish. Do you remember,
Yes.
remember those guys?
Yep.
And it was all the German guys, and it was like every week they'd be in a game where it's like, that motherfucker's cheating. That motherfucker's, look at the betting patterns here. Look at all the skins, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I just said, like, you do realize that you don't need to prove these guys 100% guilty to ostracize them. You don't, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I am not talking about punishing them. I'm not talking about banning them. I'm just saying if these motherfuckers sign up to your tournament, just say, nah, you're all right, actually. You're all right. It's not worth the headache. They're not the only ones. The Hungarian motherfuckers, whose name escapes me right now, they were another one. Everywhere they went, it fucking stank. Underdog losses, all the time. Weird clips. Germans the same. Cheating to win against higher fucking caliber players, losing against dog shit teams in suspicious circumstances.
That's also another hallmark. Is obviously if you throw games all the time, you never get the odds, and you wouldn't be able to do it. You have to be so good when you're not throwing that the odds go mental in your favor, and then mysteriously you always lose to the mad underdog.
Yeah. And all the while, everybody like in my network were telling me, Rich, look at the fucking way the odds have shifted on CSGO Lounge or whatever the betting platform was, and I'm like, well, what do you want me to do?
I've always had a theory as well, Rich, that I'll throw in as well. Is the other reason why someone who was smart who wanted to rig games wouldn't get caught is they would do it on big games that have so much betting that even their betting would get somewhat covered, so it would never be mad skew. But that's what's so bad. I even think this is just a theory, pure speculation. I think part of what makes these ones egregious is I have always found that people who are going to do something unethical, they want other people in any capacity involved because they feel like it shares the blame, or like, oh, well, they're doing it as well. So I've always felt like what happens here is the players who themselves know the game's going to get fixed just tell all their friends, and they think, whatever, everyone will benefit. It's a way to mentally put past that you're fucking someone over. And so if you even just did a small bet and won off it every time, it'd be way harder to track. But it's always it's like a game that people wouldn't be betting on anyway, and suddenly everyone's betting it's on the underdog. How blatant do you want to make it in that case?
Yeah,
it's not smart. It's not even an intelligent way to match fix.
So yeah, just just to sort of talk about what ESIC are looking to do here, I wanted to go and attend. They've got this big conference, the Match Fixing Summit, where they're talking about it with esports. It would have been great to attend, but it comes at a time when I've just accepted this new job, so all my visa paperwork's going through. So you gotta not travel for a little bit. But some of the things they're proposing are that they want to get improved funding from esports stakeholders like tournament organizers, developers, so they can basically get specialist investigators. So, well, instead of relying on fucking investigative journalists, there will be actual people who investigate betting patterns, match fixing, intelligence and leads, which I think would be really good. They also want to give, more educational aspects to it. Now, obviously, in the case of throwing a game, I think players understand that is wrong, but
yes,
maybe they're not aware of the consequences. But what's interesting is we just had a case in football. Paul Scholes You know, when he was a manager at a smaller team, and he was betting on like Man United games, didn't realize that was against FA rules. Well, it is, yes, if you're involved in football in any way, because you might have insider information and could skew, and can bet in a way that's unfair. It's against their rules. They completely have a blanket.
And also, who the fuck would bet on Man United in the last 5 years?
yeah. So he should, he got fined £8,000 for that. It was small. He had to issue an apology. But I think there are players out there that don't realize, you're placing bets on games while you're a player. And I know lots of players have done this, and especially at lower levels. That's something that they need to be educated about, and what the consequences can be if that's ever exposed publicly. Might very well be down the road, Valve might take a very hardline stance on people who've done that, and that would really be a Pandora's box. And also, as well, they want to sort of organize a crackdown on the unregulated skins and unlicensed betting sites, which is another thing I'm obviously passionate about. It was why we took a long time before we decided to go with Rivalry, because we wanted to make sure they had all their paperwork, they were licensed in the right countries, that they had, an oversight committee and all of that stuff. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen there. It's actually taking place in Malta, which is a great place for it, because obviously that's where a lot of the gambling companies are based. So it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of that, and I'm sure I'll be sent a sort of report or a debrief or whatever you want to call it. But basically, I think for now, until we get something solid in place, we all know who's fucking bullshit and who isn't. We all know when there's too much smoke for there not to be a fucking fire there. And I'm not saying we punish them, and I'm not saying we ban them, but, if you're running a small tournament and you see these teams sign up, if you don't start rejecting their applications, I'm going to think you're fucking in on it, mate. Because I'm sick and tired of these tiny little cups having these same little cuntish teams in, wrecking everybody, and all the community knows what they're doing. And it's obvious when you watch a replay or a demo, because these fuckers know, well, we're never going to play in a major, so who gives a fuck? Yeah, if you're a tournament organizer and you're letting these habitual teams come into your tournaments, you're sort of complicit in that. So it's time to put up the front and say, fuck you, you don't get to play. Maybe it only takes 6 months of you all doing that for these guys to be like, well, fucking hell, now we can't even make any money off throwing fucking games. I'd rather go back to playing straight, please. Just take a stand. Right. Let's do the questions. Rekovic on Steam, $100 patron, says the current YouTube trend is is creating tier lists of various things for ultimate viewing figures. What would be the tier list of notable CS teams at their respective peaks from the good old days up to today? So I'm guessing he wants to know who was sort of the team that had the best box office, basically, is a way of putting that.
Oh, like the most popular team?
Well, yeah, the team that would, Oh, does he? Wait. Hang on, because it's badly worded, Rekovic. I love you. I'm just trying to figure out what you actually mean here. If you're in the chat, explain. Because it says, for ultimate viewing figures, what would be the tier list?
So in other words, like, what's the most clickbait top 5, I guess, YouTube thing?
Right,
so,
okay.
You won't believe how good this CS team was
at their peak. The most money team, right.
Right, okay.
Well, that's actually an interesting question, because obviously, for example, like the classic Fnatic team with Olof, Meister, and Flusher was famously actually somewhat vilified. So I don't even know if they would be the top. Like, if everyone remembers, actually NiP was like Sweden's team, not Fnatic, bizarrely. So they wouldn't be there. I'd have to go ahead and assume like the fucking Brazilians must be very high on this list, since they have such a rabid fan base. They've got to be up there, right? Cloud9, obviously, when they're at their peak, I'm sure they had fucking 1 billion viewers. They were a very, very popular team.
Yeah.
Including the Sean Gares lineup, like the summer 2015 one, I assume would be very, very popular. Virtus Pro has got to be immediately, because I always said with Virtus Pro, the thing about them that was so interesting was they would have had a big viewer base anyway, from coming from Poland, a big country, but they had an even bigger one because everyone loved their style of play, and because they always made for amazing matches and great rivalries. I always felt like every country supported their team and then Virtus Pro second. That's why every game was a bloody home game for them. They were loving it. So VP got to be really high up the list.
Yeah.
Who else in Counter-Strike? NiP, obviously original NIP.
Yeah,
they held on for many years just because they had the core players, didn't they? Got to be well. If you want to go be in old CS, there's loads of teams. I think they're the CS:GO teams that come to mind.
I don't know if they were around long enough, but I guess across the various iterations, I always felt like the Frenchies were always like really fucking popular, weren't
they? All did as a decent, like put it this way, like especially obviously
back in the Titan days
LDLC and stuff.
the
Yeah,
LDLC,
they always had like a decent contingent. Again, probably because they had a very, their playing style was fun to watch, right? They just went fucking balls deep. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's any like sort of ones that should be inexplicably there. Because I mean, again, like, commensurate to their skill, that old Cloud9 team that had the vests, they were ridiculously popular considering they weren't that good.
I mean, because they never won a tournament, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely never won a tournament.
Who else would you?
That original King Win team ages ago when they first brought Scream and Ray.
The King Win that became G2 and then became
the novelty alone made that thrilling. Everyone was following them.
That was a team that was specifically designed for that, though. Like, they even said we went out and we just picked up a bunch of players that all had like popular followings. So yeah. And then someone says Gambit because of the Doja. I can't get over fucking X God. I can't. Okay. There's no way. I mean, he's mentally popular considering. I still say it to this day. I don't understand. I don't understand how some medieval peasant hurled into the modern day is as popular.
He's an example of meme magic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't think people actually understand. When he was an amazing CS player, he had way less fame and interest than when he was just a meme. That's the ridiculous part about it. Like this guy, by the way, if you make a Hall of Fame of Russian Counter-Strike, he'd be first ballot. Like he was one point in time like the best player they'd produced. So, but not at any point when any of the memes were around. Those were years later. Yeah,
it's wild. But hopefully that sort of answers the question. And thanks again for supporting the show, Reykjavik. Big fan of you being a big fan of us. Jerky's Minion, another $100 patron, says, will the prestige of the Masters tournament change now that the winners of DreamHack Open will be getting an invite to the Masters, or will it help the DreamHack tournaments get more attention once again? It's a good question. I think for me, personally, I think we can all see what's been happening to the non-Masters tournaments at DreamHack. I mean, they've become very poor in terms of attendance from top tier teams. And it's
you just pointed out there, mate, essentially that Moche XL tournament had like a comparable field of teams.
Yeah,
that was supposed to be a joke tournament.
And there are a lot of things going on with that. I mean, first of all, we have got a pretty stuffed calendar. As I said, I think the one mainstream CSGO brand that gets hurt the most by refreshes shenanigans is DreamHack, honestly. Sure. I mean, they're the one that definitely takes the biggest hit. But people were already opting out of DreamHacks anyway, and I'll tell you why. This is not often talked about. I might have brought it up on another show, but I don't say it often. It remains an anachronism, because back in the day, a DreamHack Winter or a DreamHack Summer, it used to be like a pilgrimage. It used to be this thing you went to because it was this huge gaming convention back when gaming wasn't all that big, and it didn't matter. It was in the arse end of nowhere. Jönköping is basically the fucking Bible Belt of Sweden. It's like no liquor, fucking fields everywhere, fishermen. You know what I mean?
Can't
it's
even
like
get food in the night either.
You can't even fly anywhere close.
Yeah, so what you have to do is typically to get to Jönköping, you have to fly into fucking Stockholm, right? You have to get a fucking one of them overnight coaches to get there. Which, by the way, the coaches are pretty fucking sick in Sweden. You get power, power cable, internet. It's legit, right? And then it's like, I don't know, however many hours it is. You get there, you get to Jönköping. You've still got to make it to the venue. Forget that. I mean, the taxis are fucking scarce. It's not a place that has Uber. It's very awkward.
Expensive as fuck as well for those taxis. But it was costing like 120 quid a day.
It's Sweden
to go like 2 miles, but it was mental.
Yeah, it's Sweden, and it's the rural part of Sweden. I mean, put it this way, a 10-minute taxi is about fucking 60 quid.
Easy, but it was outrageous.
Yeah,
should have been wearing a fucking striped jumper and not a fucking mask, but because he was robbing me daily.
Yeah, so you've got all that to factor in. Now, maybe that doesn't affect you too much if you're a professional team, right? But then you've only really got the one hotel option, by the way, which is that one that's right opposite the venue within walking distance.
Which is cheap either, I'm telling you that.
Which is not fucking cheap.
Another Robin.
Yep, and they know it is the prime location for DreamHack. That is very much reflected in their prices, and you've got to get there pretty quick to make sure you get the rooms there, or you're staying in a fucking bed sit, taxi drive away, and you get fucking robbed blind. So it is super expensive, and let's be real, in terms of exposure for esports, kind of becoming less and less important to go, less and less relevant, right? Yeah. So all of that is really factored into why teams. It's only teams that are like, we're never going to win anything else. This is at least a chance.
I've noticed anytime you ever get a good team there, it's because the good team's on a downward spiral, and cynically they think, get some good exposure, win an event, beat up a few smaller teams. We'll be, just what the doctors ordered. No one's going there because they think it's going to be added to a list of great trophies won. That's long gone at this point in time.
Yeah, and like I say, so it's a combination of things. Now, DreamHack tomorrow could make it so everybody puts themselves through the fucking, what used to be your fun. Back when you first get into esports, you got your first DreamHack. All of the stuff I've just described is quite quaint and interesting. 10th or 12th time you've fucking done it, it's just a fucking nightmare. And you just, why am I putting myself through this again? But DreamHack can change that tomorrow if they decide to make it $1 million tournament. All the top teams go again.
Sure.
No problem. But the money isn't there for them right now to warrant that. And it's very much, they want the DreamHack Masters to become the flagship. Yep. They're all right with actually the on-shipping. The on-shipping relationship is an anachronism that goes back to Robert Olin, who identified it as a place that had nothing going on and would really benefit from a huge LAN event there. And, that's why they gave him the key to the city. It bolsters
the esports side and that festival should basically be separate things at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think that harms esports at all. And I think it would actually give DreamHack more freedom to pursue some more interesting stuff. I mean, we're always seeing how they have, interesting like bands and artists there, and there's always been a musical component to it, but like maybe PewDiePie's attended a DreamHack Winter on a couple of occasions. I think I met him at one. So it's like, it's an anachronism. I think it has no place really being involved in esports anymore. It's very clear DreamHack value the Masters brand more. It's attached to the IEM stuff, the Intel sponsorship,
the Grand Slam and all that.
Yeah, the Grand Slam, exactly. So I mean, that is where we should be driving it. So doing it this way is basically a way to, get an additional team airlifted, like one of those teams who sort of took the risk and was willing to support the lesser event. I don't really have a problem with that. But honestly, I think the best thing to do at this point would just be put a pin in the summer and the winter of esports events. Honestly, I don't know how much it would hurt their bottom line. I don't think much if you put in like other stuff. Anyway, but Pounder 420, because of course, $100 patron. Now that Daps is out of NRG, would he make a good fit to help Cloud9 rebuild? So, I mean, obviously, I think we talked about this a little bit, but we can answer it in a bit more explicit detail. I mean, look, they haven't had a real in-game leader for a while, not in the Daps mold. And it's something that I think they should try. Golden clearly hasn't worked out. They even tried other options, when Flusher was in-game leading for a bit. That didn't work out. I really rate Daps. I think Daps has a great mind for the game. It's like what we joked about.
He's the NAMSL. There you go.
Yeah, to a degree. But of course, MSL's a ruthless little cunt.
That's true.
Daps is completely the opposite.
Yeah.
Daps is the guy where it's like, I love you all so much, I can't cut any of you. I guess it'll have to be me again.
Whereas MSL kind of goes, I like you the best of them all, and that's why I'm going to cut you to send him. He's like fucking Kaiser Soze or some shit.
Exactly.
So I will show this team a feat of will.
Yeah. So it's wildly that, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I'm a big admirer of Daps. I think he has a great mind for the game. I think he has a great eye for talent. I think he understands systems. I think he has a good way of calling. Now the question becomes, how does Daps rub up against some of the egos in the team? And let me give you a bold prediction. I think he's going to turn Rush around. I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air for Automatic. I think they're immediately going to click. I think if this TenZ kid comes in, it's perfect. It's just like NRG all over again. Cajun's on thin fucking ice. Cajun and Daps, I don't think that's going to click. So my opinion.
No, I would say the main problem you have there is that Cajun B's personality would run absolute roughshod all over Daps. Like he would have no, and what grounds would Daps have to even chastise him? Like this is a guy who's older than you, could accomplish more than you, literally is used to most of his career being dicking on teams that you're in. Like you're gonna have a hard one on that one. I agree though, the other ones would all seemingly just fit. Like they'd all be open to it. Like at this point, Daps is coming to them in a positive light. They'd be looking at him going, hey, he could do a lot of things here. And again, that's why I'd also contrast him with MSL. He's probably not going to take you to the major, but at the moment, he could get you back to the promised land. He could get you back in that top 10. He could get you back in position where you sign the other people who won't mind playing with him. And then one day, you can bring in I'm a Pet and you can kick Daps as well. Maybe bring in Stanislaw. So the route's always there at any point in time. If you want to get Stanislaw, just get Daps first. That's like you warm him up. You know, he's the fluffer. He's Stanislaw's fluffer.
And not to mention, not to
Leave
mention, yeah, not to mention, you know, look, there's been a lot of stuff linking Sonny with Cloud9 before.
I'd like to see that with fucking Daps in the team, mate.
Yeah,
give me automatic Sonny, Cajun B Daps. That's a team right there. Let's go.
So you know, we've that's been floated. I think somebody tweeted some shit out today. I haven't had a chance to check, but whatever. So hopefully that answers your question. Benakagi Assassin says, excluding Chinese CS, what do you think have been the main contributors as to why Southeast Asia and Far East countries, such as MVP, Team NXL, Lucid Dream from Thailand, Boot Dream, Scape from Singapore, Orange Esports from Malaysia, have been unable to produce a tier 1 tournament winning team? I mean, well, okay, first of all, let's just produce a consistent top 20 team, right? I mean, baby steps. Why haven't they been able to do that? It comes down to, in my opinion, from having been to some of these countries and knowing people from these countries, the game just isn't culturally relevant in the same way it is in a lot of the countries that produce top tier teams. And this for a variety of reasons. You know, the penalties in CSGO, especially for having low performance computers and low end rigs, which you might find in countries that don't necessarily have the same distribution of wealth as other countries, the penalties are far greater. Like if you have 40 FPS and you're trying to play CSGO, than if you have 40 FPS and you're trying to play Dota 2 and some of these other games.
I'll even throw in as well, by the way, one of the best things a game like League of Legends has going for it is you can just play on whatever mouse is there. It doesn't fucking matter. Like you'll still be fairly close to your level.
Exactly.
Everyone knows in Counter-Strike, you got to have your mouse, you got to have a keyboard, you got to have everything set up. It's 10 times harder to get a comfortable feel than all those games you're talking about.
Yeah, and on top of that, right? You know, like you say, it's not just you know, it's not just the PC, as you say. You've got to buy performance enhancing. You need a mouse that's precise and in tune with you. Also, as well, a lot of these places culturally, they don't do their gaming at home. They do their gaming at LAN cafes. It's a social thing. It also represents more value for money in some cases, because you can pay a very small amount and play all day. And you'll find in a lot of these countries that's actually the culture, and it's not just a thing about you're making stereotypes about underdeveloped countries. Sure. No, not at all, because they do this in South Korea, which is a very developed country. Duncan's lived there and seen it himself. The PC ban culture is a very real thing. But also as well, it's not just because of performance issues and all of the level of dedication, the fact you require specific equipment to be a good pro. It's that there were actually alternatives that were big in Asia, because CSGO wasn't, CS didn't get exported there until sort of
just the vacuum got filled.
Yeah, exactly. They had their own like Crossfire and stuff like this. But also as well, people want to be able to get that value for money when they say, hey, I'm committing to 8 hours playing in a LAN cafe. So they want to play something that has, a recognized league or ladder. Counter-Strike never used to have that. So MMOs became unbelievably popular, Ragnarok and stuff like this. Stuff where just like limitless progression and grind became super popular. And that's where people dedicated their time. Now in the modern era, or maybe that trend's moving away, well, PUBG is huge out in Asia. And not necessarily all of these countries, because that's still a high performance game. Although, again, the penalties for low performance in PUBG aren't as severe as they are in CS:GO. But that really took off. And also, I mean, just in South Korea especially, like CS:GO's got no chance of even breaking into the top 5 games in a PC bang. I couldn't even tell you what they are, but I know like Overwatch is like 4th. And FIFA is like 3rd, and League of Legends is clearly number 1, and then it's probably like StarCraft, right? So how do you break into that? You know, those games have become part of the cultural fabric of these countries. There's no room. Like you're just playing too much catch up, and as a result, nobody pitches the game to them. You have to understand like cultural sensibilities as well about running around and banging people's heads off with AKs. Doesn't always translate in countries, especially where you might see shit like that, like real shit like that. So yeah, there's lots of nuance going on as to why CS:GO hasn't become particular popular in certain countries. But again, there are some on the come up. You know, the Emiratis, they don't mind. They're all right with it. They're actually wanting to have a big push in Counter Strike, and it nearly happened on a few times. Even going back to CGS, where we nearly had a franchise in Dubai called Dubai Mirage. So. It just never came about, but that was a plan for expansion, and we've already had ESL out there. So, you know, that could be a bold new frontier. But ultimately, while the question's an interesting one, it's really nigh on impossible to answer. But all of those factors stop people playing the game. The less people playing the game, the less talent you have coming through would be sort of my summary.
I mean, by the way, Valve themselves would very much like Counter-Strike to be big in those countries in theory. It's just they haven't done any of the steps, as I pointed out many times, to go ahead and do that. Like, they don't seem to care about the different distribution method. Having to work with certain local partners might be something they don't want to do, since they're used to making all the money themselves from Steam. There's a million factors, unfortunately. And then I'd throw in that, yes, the difference is, in case you don't follow those games, in Dota 2 and League of Legends, Southeast Asia and Far East is very relevant. Like, they have some of the better teams, sometimes even better than some Western teams. So I would also just say not the game they're super into, really. So
yeah,
it's
and
easier to say why they haven't than what they could do to do it, put it that way.
Yeah, and it's really interesting actually, because a lot of like League of Legends will very often get credit for being like the free-to-play pioneer. But honestly, in Asia especially, Nexon were putting out loads of free-to-play
games.
Yeah,
that's part of the PC Culture Cafe as well. Because think about it, right? What better way to get your game played if yours is free to play?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't even have to own them a game. You can just be on any machine.
Free to play and grind concepts were going on for fucking years before the West even saw them, and we obviously just put our own unique spin on them. But Nexon were sort of the pioneers of that business model. If you want to go look up your history, it's super interesting. Right, okay, I think that's us. I think that's all the questions. Thanks to all the people who asked questions, because of course you are patrons of the show, and thanks to all the other patrons that didn't ask questions, which of course you're going to be entitled to. If I read your name off this list, you're entitled to ask a question on the show. It's $100 patrons: Jerky's Minion, Detlef Insomniac, Reykjavik on Steam, Mikhail, Alex Ragnarsson, and Pounder 420. Our $50 patrons: Marcus Kiumpa, TC Owen, Sardzwa, Watch Doge, Carve, Madsen, Colin Penny, and Benekagi Assassin. So, there we have it. Thanks a lot, Duncan. Great to catch up. You too, Sam. Thanks to all of you for tuning in, all the people who subscribed as well, which I could hear was jumping off. Appreciate that. We'll be back roughly next week, probably talking about EPS and getting hyped for ESL 1 Cologne. So until then, take care of yourselves.